Yo, what's up everyone? It's Arcane Paradox, and today we're checking out, what if Fawkes chose Harry at age 3 and burned 41 memory blocks revealing Dumbledore's scheme. Drop a like if you're hyped. Subscribe for daily content. Let's get this story started. Chapter 1, The Burning the Phoenix came on a Tuesday. Later, Harry would think about that detail, the sheer mundanity of it. Not a storm-racked night, not a blood moon, not any of the dramatic stagings that fate supposedly preferred. Just a Tuesday in October, pale grey sky outside the window, the smell of Aunt Petunia's burnt toast drifting up the stairs, and Vernon Desley's television muttering sports commentary at a volume designed to remind everyone in the house that this was his house and his television and his noise. Harry was 3 years old and sleeping in a crib that was slightly too small for him because no one had thought to buy a larger one, or rather, no one had thought it worth the bother. He had bruises on his left arm from where Dudley had grabbed him 2 days ago. Dudley, who was also 3 but built like a small boulder and had already learned, through careful parental instruction, that Harry's reactions to pain were funny. Harry had not cried. He'd learned, in the particular accelerated way that children in difficult circumstances learn things, that crying brought Aunt Petunia's sharp face and sharper voice, and that neither of those things improved any situation he'd ever been in. So he slept. Small and quiet and already, at 3, practiced at making himself take up as little space as possible. The Phoenix arrived through a window that was definitely closed. There was no sound of breaking glass, no dramatic entrance. The window was simply closed, and then there was a soft weight on the crib rail, and the room filled with warmth that had nothing to do with the central heating, a warmth that felt like the memory of sunlight, like something that remembered what it was before it forgot, and then remembered again. Harry's eyes opened. The bird was extraordinary. Not in the way that Harry had words for at 3, but his body knew it, his chest knew it, the way a tuning fork knows when the right note is struck nearby. The Phoenix was the color of fire at its most honest, deep red that shaded into gold at the wing tips, tail feathers that trailed like lit embers, eyes that were amber and ancient and looking at him with an expression that no bird should have been capable of wearing. An expression that was something between grief and recognition and a decision already made. Harry stared at it. The Phoenix stared back. "Hello," Harry said, because he was 3 and had been raised on very little warmth but a great deal of Aunt Petunia's relentless social propriety, so he had accidentally learned manners in the spaces between everything else. The Phoenix made a sound. Not the full song, Harry would hear that later and understand why people wept without knowing why, but a single low note, almost conversational. Like an answer. Then it leaned forward and pressed its beak, very gently, to Harry's forehead. And the world broke open. It was not like remembering. Remembering is gentle, a door swinging open, light spilling through. This was 41 locks blowing off their hinges simultaneously, 41 walls collapsing inward, 41 rooms full of things he'd never known he owned pouring into him all at once. Harry made no sound because there was no breath available for sound. He was too busy being filled. He saw his mother first. Lily Potter, and even in the flood of sensation and image and raw knowing he felt his chest do something complicated and painful at the sight of her, laughing in a kitchen that wasn't Petunia's, red hair catching the light, saying something to a dark-haired man who was laughing too and who Harry recognized the way you recognize your own reflection. James Potter. His father. Alive and laughing, and then, the memory shifted. Not the night itself, that was not what the 41 blocks contained. What they contained was something almost worse, the before. The planning. The choices. He saw Dumbledore. Old, robed in purple, sitting in a stone office full of whirring silver instruments, talking to someone Harry couldn't quite see. The words came fragmented, broken by whatever magic had tried to bury them. The boy must not know, not yet, the blood protection requires. Petunia's house is the only. He will be shaped by what he lacks. When the time comes, he must be willing. The last word landed like a stone in still water. Willing. The ripples from it spread across everything, across the image of the small cupboard under the stairs Harry had already been informed would be his room once he was old enough to sleep there. Across the bruises on his arm. Across every burnt piece of toast and every sharp word and every careful construction of smallness that had been built around him since he arrived at this house. He must be willing. More images. Gringotts, a vault, the words Potter Family Trust etched in gold above a door. A will, his parents' will, with names on it. Sirius Black listed as primary guardian. Sirius Black, who was in Azkaban. Sirius Black, who Harry now knew with absolute certainty had never betrayed anyone, because the 41 memory blocks contained the truth of that too, buried deep, wrapped in so many layers of charm work that someone had worked very hard to ensure it stayed hidden. Peter Pettigrew. Small. Nervous. Alive. And then the prophecy, not the full text, but the fact of it, the shape of it, Dumbledore's knowledge of it and his response to that knowledge, which had been to construct a situation from which a 17-year-old boy could only escape by being willing to die. Harry was 3 years old. He understood approximately 60% of what was flooding into him. But 3-year-olds are smarter than adults consistently give them credit for, and Harry had always been smarter than most, and the 60% he understood was enough. It was, in fact, rather more than enough. The phoenix sang one pure note. The last block shattered. Harry lay in his crib, staring at the ceiling, breathing in shallow careful increments, and the warmth from the phoenix wrapped around him like something he didn't have a word for yet. He would learn the word later. It was called safe. He didn't know it yet because he'd never felt it before. The phoenix made that low, conversational sound again. Harry turned his head and looked at it. It looked back. In its amber eyes, something settled, the look of something that had done what it came to do and was now simply present. Waiting. Fawkes, Harry said. The name was in the memories. The phoenix tilted its head. That's your name. The phoenix, Fawkes, ruffled his feathers in a way that was unmistakably affirmative. Harry was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Vernon's television changed channels. Aunt Petunia said something sharp to Dudley. Rain began against the window. He sent you to watch me, Harry said. He meant Dumbledore. He was 3. He got the name wrong on the first try, Dumbledore, but got the meaning exactly right. Does he know you're here? Fawkes made a sound that was distinctly negative. Did you choose to come? The affirmative ruffle again, slower this time. Deliberate. Harry looked at the ceiling again. He was processing, actually processing, in the methodical way he'd always had even before the memories, the way that had made Aunt Petunia occasionally look at him sideways and say unnerving things about children who thought too much. He was sorting through what he knew, what he needed to know, and what he needed to do. He was 3. He couldn't do very much yet. But he was also, it turned out, a Potter with the full weight of a Potter's education sitting in his head courtesy of 41 shattered memory blocks. And he was also the child of Lily Evans Potter, which meant he had her precise and unflinching mind. And he was also, though he didn't have the vocabulary for this yet, absolutely furious in the clean cold way of someone who has just understood that their entire life has been arranged without their consent. The fury didn't make him loud. It made him still. I need time, he told Fawkes. To learn. To grow up. Can you? He paused, searching 3-year-old vocabulary for a concept that required considerably more words. Can you come back? When I need you. Fawkes regarded him for a long moment. Then he leaned forward again, not to the forehead this time, but pressed his warm beak briefly to Harry's small fist where it rested on the crib rail. A different kind of contact. A compact. A yes that meant something deeper than agreement. Then he was gone, between one moment and the next, leaving only a single burning feather on the crib rail and the fading warmth of something ancient and trustworthy in the air. Harry picked up the feather. It was warm and didn't burn him. He curled his small fingers around it, closed his eyes, and began, in the quiet dark behind his eyelids, the very first of what would become years of careful, patient, meticulous planning. Downstairs, Vernon Dursley changed the channel again and never knew that everything had just changed. The weeks following the Phoenix's visit were, on the surface, entirely ordinary. This was by design. Harry did not tell the Dursleys anything. He thought about it, briefly, the way you might think about poking something dangerous with a stick, and discarded it. The memories had given him a clear picture of his aunt and uncle's investment in his ignorance. They knew who he was. They knew what he was. They had been told, very clearly, by a very tall old man in unusual clothing, that it was important he not know these things about himself. And they had agreed with an enthusiasm that suggested the request aligned neatly with their own preferences. Petunia Dursley knew more than she let on. That was the thing that sat heaviest in Harry's chest in the days after, not the revelations about Dumbledore, which were complex and layered and required a level of analysis he was building toward, not even the revelation about Sirius Black sitting in Azkaban for crimes he hadn't committed. It was Aunt Petunia, who had known and smiled her thin smile and pointed at the cupboard under the stairs and said that will do for the boy without even a flicker. Harry watched her over breakfast. She was angular and sharp and moved through her own kitchen with the efficiency of someone who found comfort in control. She didn't look at him when she could avoid it. He didn't say anything. He ate his small portion of eggs and kept his face the same blank canvas he'd been training it to be before the Phoenix came and would keep training it to be after, and he watched, and he thought. He was 3 years old. He would be at Hogwarts in 8 years. In those 8 years, he needed to learn everything. He needed to learn it quietly, in the margins of the life the Dursleys had prescribed for him, without alerting Dumbledore that his carefully constructed ignorance had been thoroughly demolished. The memories had given him a foundation, his parents' education, fragments of magical theory, the general shape of the wizarding world as Lily and James Potter had known it. But fragments weren't enough. He needed more, and he needed it systematically. The first thing he needed was a library card. This required getting Aunt Petunia to take him to the library, which required approximately 3 weeks of careful groundwork, strategic displays of excellent behavior, a studied performance of the kind of bright, eager-to-please child that Petunia's sense of neighborhood optics could be induced to appreciate, and one well-timed request delivered in public, outside the post office, where refusing would have required more social capital than Petunia was willing to spend. She took him. She sat in the adults section with a magazine, deeply uninterested, while Harry went to the children's section, which he stripped of anything useful in approximately 2 visits before migrating, casually, naturally, toward the section of the library that smelled better, older books, denser, more demanding, and began working his way through it. He read faster than he should have. He was careful about that in front of people, slowing himself down to a pace that looked age-appropriate, but alone between the shelves he moved at his actual speed, which was quite unsettling if you happened to see it. Science first. He had a strong instinct that magic operated according to rules and that understanding the physical world's rules would help him map the magical one. Then history. Then biography. He read with the focused intensity of someone who understood, bone deep, that time was a resource they were already behind on spending. Dudley found him reading once, at home, a library book on basic chemistry propped against his pillow, and took it away on general principle. Harry waited until that night, retrieved it from Dudley's room while Dudley slept the deep sleep of someone with no conscience and no concerns, returned it to his own space, and continued reading. He was 4 by then. He replaced the book 3 days later before it was due without anyone being the wiser. The magic started properly around his 5th birthday, though it had been flickering since the Phoenix came. Small things, things he could have attributed to coincidence if he hadn't known better, a glass sliding toward his hand without being reached for, a door locking itself when he wanted privacy, lights brightening slightly when he needed to read in the dark. He began experimenting deliberately, with the careful methodical approach he brought to everything, working out how intention and emotion translated into effect. He was, he discovered, very good at this. The magic responded to him the way fire responds to air, eagerly, immediately, with a warmth that felt more like conversation than compulsion. He made sure no one saw. Not because he was afraid of the Dursleys' reaction. He was 5 and already, quietly, not afraid of the Dursleys. But the memories had included enough about the trace, the monitoring charm placed on all underage wizards, that he understood any significant magic would send a signal. He used his magic in small, precise, controlled amounts. Enough to practice. Small enough to be noise, not signal. Vernon tried to put him in the cupboard under the stairs for the first time when he was 6. Harry had been expecting it. The memory had included that detail, a fragment of Dumbledore's planning, the cupboard specifically mentioned as part of the shaping of the boy who would eventually walk into danger willingly. He'd spent 2 years deciding how to handle this moment, because the handling of it mattered. Too dramatic a response created attention. Too passive a response established a precedent. He needed a response that was final without being explosive. Vernon came home from work in a bad mood, which was common, and found Harry at the kitchen table reading one of Dudley's discarded picture books, a thin transparent cover, since Harry's actual reading material was hidden, and something about the sight of Harry simply existing in the kitchen without permission tripped whatever switch Vernon kept barely bolted down. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, grabbed Harry's arm, and said the thing about the cupboard being good enough and who did he think he was, and if he thought he was going to sit around being a burden. The glass on the counter exploded. Not violently, it didn't spray glass. It simply cracked apart, the way glass does under sudden temperature change, a sharp decisive sound that stopped Vernon mid-sentence. The water in it spread across the counter and dripped to the floor, and the kitchen was very quiet. Harry looked at the broken glass. Then he looked at Vernon. "I'd rather not," Harry said. He was 6, and his voice was small, but the quality of his stillness was not small at all. "The cupboard." Vernon stared at him. His face went through several colors. Harry watched this with interest and waited. What Vernon Dursley was not, for all his many faults, was stupid about self-preservation. He'd ignored a great many things about Harry because ignoring them was easier than confronting what they meant. But there was something in the child's eyes at that moment, something in the complete absence of the fear Vernon had always counted on as a given, that pressed against a very primal button. He let go of Harry's arm. He didn't put him in the cupboard that day, or any day after. He didn't touch Harry again either, though it was several more months before Harry figured out quite what had shifted in Vernon's calculations. When he did work it out, it was through sheer observation. Vernon was afraid. Not of Harry specifically, but of what Harry was, and the broken glass had reminded him of it in a way that stuck. Vernon Dursley dealt with things he was afraid of by pretending they didn't exist, and so for the next several years, Harry was treated with the particular brand of aggressive indifference that the Dursleys had apparently decided was a safe middle ground. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't anything like warmth. But it was functional, and Harry was practical. Fawkes came back on a Thursday in March when Harry was 7. He appeared on the windowsill while Harry was working through a borrowed university-level physics textbook, borrowed in the sense that Harry had found it in a box of items Dudley's primary school teacher had donated to the neighborhood, and had taken it before it reached the bin. Fawkes appeared and watched him read for a while with an expression that might have been approval. Harry looked up. "Hello," he said, the same as the first time. Fawkes made the low conversational sound. "I have questions," Harry said. He'd been compiling them for 4 years, adding to a mental list with the diligence of someone who knew the question-answerer had an unpredictable schedule. About the blocks. Some of the memories were fragmented. There was one about a vault, not just the main Potter vault. A secondary vault, different crest. "Do you know what that means?" Fawkes regarded him steadily, then made a sound and tilted his head in a way that Harry had learned, over repeat visits, meant not yet, but you're asking the right things. Harry accepted this. He'd learned that Fawkes operated on his own schedule, that he answered in ways that weren't always direct, and that the information he provided was consistently more useful than the information he withheld. It was an unusual relationship. Harry found he didn't mind it. Fawkes was honest in a way that most things in his life were not. "He's watching me," Harry said. It wasn't a question. "Dumbledore." "Not directly, but, there are checks. Someone comes by, I think. A woman. She looks in the window sometimes and walks on. Fawkes ruffled. Yes. She reports that I'm small and ordinary and unremarkable. The same ruffle, with what Harry had come to read as a note of dark amusement. Good, Harry said. He turned a page. That's fine. I am unremarkable. For now. He was quiet a moment, reading a line about energy conservation, something clicking pleasantly in his mind as it mapped against something from the memories about magical resonance. I'll need money. When I get to Gringotts, I'll need to know what I actually have access to. Fawkes tilted his head the other way. I found a copy of Gringotts Protocol in a book at the library. It was in a section on magical law, old edition, 1960s, someone had donated it. Apparently a Potter heir, if they can prove identity by blood, can access the trust accounts independently of any appointed guardian. Harry looked up from the physics textbook. Dumbledore has himself listed as guardian of record. But he can't do that if the heir contests it. Can he? Fawkes sang 3 notes. Low, mid, high. Harry had worked out this particular sequence through context over months. It meant you already know the answer to that. He can't, Harry confirmed. So the question is timing. I need to be in Diagon Alley to contest it, which means I need a way into Diagon Alley before my Hogwarts letter, which means, he paused. The letter. When it comes, it'll come to here. To a guardian who will almost certainly not give it to me, if they've been instructed to manage my introduction to the wizarding world. Fawkes made a sound that was somewhere between a trill and a warning. Right. So I need to be ready before the letter. I need to be ready enough that when it comes, I can move first. Harry looked at the phoenix with an expression that was, for a 7-year-old, remarkably composed. I have 4 years. That's enough. Fawkes looked at him for a long moment, amber eyes steady. Then he leaned forward and pressed his beak to Harry's forehead, not the shattering contact of the first night, just a touch, brief and warm and somehow communicative. It felt, Harry thought, like being told yes, that's enough, go on. It felt like something he still didn't have a word for, though he was getting closer to it. The phoenix left. Harry turned back to his physics textbook. Outside, the March wind pushed dead leaves against the window, and number 4, Privet Drive went about its business of being ordinary, and Harry went about his business of becoming extraordinary in the quiet and the dark and the margins of things. He was 9 when he found the letters. Petunia's house was rigorously organized in all the places guests might see and quietly chaotic in the places they wouldn't. The attic was the latter, boxes and bags and bundles of things Petunia couldn't bring herself to throw away but couldn't bear to look at either. Harry had been using it for 2 years as a supplemental reading space, since the slanted light through the attic's small window was better than the light in his room and no one ever came up to check. He knew which floorboards creaked. He knew where to step. The box was in the far corner, behind a broken Christmas tree stand, under a bag of Dudley's outgrown clothes. It was sealed with packing tape that had yellowed and gone brittle, and it was labeled in Petunia's handwriting, L.E., miscellaneous. The L.E. took him a moment. Then it didn't. Lily Evans. Harry sat very still for a very long time. He opened the box with the careful patience of someone handling something fragile. Inside, 3 paperback novels, a dried flower pressed between 2 pieces of card that had gone faded and soft with age, a photograph, moving, the wizarding kind, a girl with red hair laughing at the camera with a warmth that hurt to look at, and a bundle of letters tied with kitchen string. He read the novels first. Not because he needed to, but because she had touched them, had dog-eared certain pages, had written small notes in the margins in green pen, yes. Next to one passage, wrong, completely wrong next to another, a small drawing of a lily flower next to a third. It took him 2 visits to finish all 3 and he memorized every annotation. The letters were between his mother and his aunt. The early ones, dated when they were both young, before Hogwarts, were in the careful handwriting of children, full of the ordinary texture of sisters who talked without pretense. Petunia asked about Lily's school, using the word that place with a rigidity that even then suggested armoring. Lily wrote back about friends and lessons and, in one letter, about a boy from her year named Severus who knew more spells than anyone and wasn't kind about it but was brilliant, and she thought maybe underneath all that he was lonely. Harry filed that information away and kept reading. The letters from later years were different. More guarded on both sides. And then one, undated, on Hogwarts stationery, that made Harry's breath stop and start again more carefully. "Toonie," it said, "I know you think I don't see it. I do see it. Mum's getting worse and I can't come home every weekend. I'm sorry, I know that's not what you want to hear. I'm trying to get permission for an extended visit in March. I need to tell you something that's been sitting on me all winter. I'm worried about Dumbledore. I know everyone thinks he's wonderful. James thinks he's wonderful too, though James has started saying things that make me wonder if he's noticed what I've noticed. There's a prophecy, Toonie. I can't tell you all of it, obviously, but the point is that Albus knows about it, and his response wasn't what I'd hoped. It felt like he was making something instead of preventing something. I might be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I'm probably wrong. He's Dumbledore. Everyone says so. Love, Lily." Harry read that letter 4 times. He put everything back in the box and sealed it with fresh tape and moved it to exactly the position he'd found it in, and then he sat in the attic in the fading light and was very quiet for a while. His mother had known. Had felt it, at least, the wrongness of it, the shape of something being constructed rather than defended against. She'd been right and she'd doubted herself because he was Dumbledore and everyone said so, and that doubt had cost her everything. I might be wrong, she'd written. She wasn't. He went downstairs and made himself tea and sat at the kitchen table and allowed himself exactly 20 minutes of something he didn't normally permit, which was pure unfiltered grief, for his mother, for her handwriting in green pen, for the dried flower, for the warmth in the photograph and the fact that the warmth was gone. 20 minutes. He counted them with the kitchen clock. Then he stopped, and finished his tea, and went back to planning. He was 10 when he performed his first deliberate, significant act of magic. The letter had come, not his Hogwarts letter, that was still a year away, but a letter from his primary school informing the Dursleys that Harry was being evaluated for accelerated placement due to consistently extraordinary academic performance. Vernon had opened it. His face had gone the color of old putty. He'd sat down and looked at Harry across the kitchen table with the expression of someone encountering evidence of something they'd preferred to forget existed. "You did that," Vernon said. "I'm afraid my scores are what they are," Harry said, which was not exactly a denial. Vernon opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. He was trying to locate the register of angry authority he normally operated in and finding it oddly unavailable. Harry watched this struggle with gentle patience. "You'll be going to that school," Vernon said finally. It wasn't clear whether he meant the accelerated program or Hogwarts. Harry suspected, from the look on his face, that it was the latter. "I expect so," Harry said. That evening, in the back garden, in the dark, Harry stood with his feet in the grass and looked up at a sky that was showing the first few early stars and let himself feel the full extent of what he was carrying. Not to examine it or catalogue it, he did that constantly, rigorously, in the same way he did everything, but just to feel it for a moment. The weight of it. The peculiar aloneness of being the only person in a house full of people who knew the whole truth. He raised his right hand, palm up, and thought fire. Not destructive fire, not angry fire, but the specific quality of warmth he associated with Fawkes, with those amber eyes and that deliberate presence on a Tuesday morning years ago. A small flame appeared in his palm. Steady, completely controlled. Gold and red. He looked at it for a while. Then he closed his hand, felt the warmth absorbed back into himself, and went inside to prepare for the next year. The Hogwarts letter came on a Saturday, addressed to Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4, Privet Drive. The address was always a source of minor satisfaction to Harry. Whoever the Hogwarts magic was that tracked students and addressed their letters, it had an opinion. Vernon intercepted it. This was expected. Vernon held it with both hands and looked at it with the expression of someone holding an unexploded device, which was, Harry felt, not an entirely inaccurate metaphor. "Is that for me?" Harry asked from the hallway. "No," said Vernon. "I think it is," Harry said. "I think if you read the address, it has my name on it." "You're not, there's nothing, Uncle Vernon." Harry's voice was 11 years old and even and completely unruffled. "I've known since I was 3. I know about my parents. I know about Hogwarts. I know about the will and the guardianship and Gringotts. I know quite a lot of things." He paused. "The letter is mine. I'd like it, please." The silence that followed was the particular silence of a large man discovering that the architecture of a situation is entirely different from what he thought it was. Vernon's hands trembled slightly. The letter trembled with them. Harry walked forward and took it. "Thank you," he said, with complete sincerity. He went upstairs, sat on his bed, opened the envelope carefully, and read the Hogwarts acceptance letter with the pleasure of someone finally receiving something they've been waiting a long time for. Supply list, term start date, instructions for Diagon Alley. All of it exactly as the memories had described, standard and formal and official. He put it in his jacket pocket. Then he went back downstairs, walked through the kitchen where Petunia was standing very still looking at nothing, through the hall where Vernon had retreated to his armchair and was staring at the muted television with the eyes of a man reassessing something foundational, and out the front door. He walked to the end of Privet Drive. He turned right at the corner, away from the direction of the shops, toward the small park with the broken swings. He sat on the least broken swing and looked at the sky and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Fawkes appeared on the swing's crossbar with a sound like a single-struck bell, and folded his wings, and looked at Harry with those amber eyes. "It came," Harry said. He wasn't talking about the letter. Fawkes made the low conversational sound. "I need to get to Gringotts before Dumbledore knows I have the letter. Before he can send someone to guide me through the wizarding world. Before someone can be in place." Harry looked at the Phoenix. "Can you take me to Diagon Alley?" Fawkes was quiet for a moment, the quality of consideration. Then he extended one wing. Harry looked at that wing, at the deep red and gold, at the burning warmth of it. He thought about his mother writing "I might be wrong" in a letter she didn't know would survive her. He thought about Sirius Black in a prison cell for 11 years. He thought about 41 memory blocks designed to make him willing. He reached out and gripped the offered wing. The park dissolved in a wash of fire and warmth and motion, and when the world assembled itself again, they were standing in a narrow cobblestoned alley in London, and above the door in front of them was a sign in gold letters, Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Harry straightened his jacket. He was 11 years old and small for his age and wearing Dudley's hand-me-downs, and he walked through that door like he'd been expected. Because, he had long since decided, he had been. Just not by the people who thought they were doing the expecting. The goblins looked up. Harry met the nearest one's eyes, sharp amber, not unlike Fawkes's, ancient and assessing, and said, in perfect clear tones, "My name is Harry James Potter. I am the heir of the ancient and noble house of Potter. I'm here to contest a guardianship and discuss my accounts." He paused. "I have a feeling there's quite a lot to discuss." The goblin looked at him for a long moment. Then, very deliberately, the goblin smiled, not warmly, exactly, because goblins didn't do warmth the way humans understood it. But with a quality of interest that suggested Harry had said exactly the right things in exactly the right order. "Indeed, Mr. Potter," the goblin said. "We have been waiting." Harry settled into the chair across the desk from the goblin, and Fawkes, who had followed him inside and was perched on the back of the chair as though he owned the building, rustled his wings and sang one quiet note. And Harry, for the first time in his life, sitting in a gold-columned bank with a phoenix at his back and a goblin leaning forward with something that looked very much like anticipation, felt entirely at home. Chapter 2, The boy who remembered the goblin's name was Ragnarok, and he was senior account manager for the Potter family holdings, a position he had held for 32 years without ever once expecting to sit across from the heir in question before said heir had so much as set foot in Diagon Alley. He was, in his professional estimation, entirely delighted by this. "Your account has been in a state of managed suspension," Ragnarok said, pulling a thick leather-bound ledger from a drawer with the precision of someone who knew exactly where everything was at all times. Managed, meaning someone has been managing it. Suspension, meaning the heir has not been consulted in this management. Someone being Albus Dumbledore, Harry said. Ragnarok's eyes moved to him with the particular sharpness of a creature who appreciated directness. Dumbledore filed for emergency magical guardianship 11 days after your parents' deaths. The filing cited the unavailability of the named guardian, Sirius Black, at that time in ministry custody, and the urgency of your physical protection requirements. Sirius Black was never tried, Harry said. He was placed in Azkaban without a trial. A very small pause. Ragnarok turned a page in the ledger. That is a matter of ministry record, yes. Which means the guardianship filing was based on a legal fiction. Sirius Black was listed as unavailable because he was imprisoned. He was imprisoned without due process, which means his imprisonment has no standing, which means his unavailability has no legal standing, which means the guardianship filing was built on nothing. Ragnarok looked at Harry over the ledger. The look was slow and considered and carried within it the particular quality of a professional reassessing a situation they had perhaps underestimated. "You are 11 years old," Ragnarok said. "I'm aware," Harry said. "That is, considerable legal reasoning for 11. I've had time to prepare." Harry folded his hands on the desk. Fawkes shifted on the chair back, feathers rustling. "Can Gringotts contest the guardianship independently, on the grounds of filing irregularity? Or does it require a Wisengamot petition?" "Both paths are available," Ragnarok said carefully. "Gringotts contesting on grounds of account mismanagement is the faster route, but carries less weight in terms of broader implications. A Wisengamot petition would require a sponsor of standing. Who qualifies as a sponsor of standing? Any member of the Wisengamot. Any head of a noble and ancient house." Ragnarok paused. "Or the account holder themselves, if the account holder can demonstrate majority of intent." "Define majority of intent." "The magical coming of age is 17, Ragnarok said. However, Gringotts recognizes a secondary threshold, what we term cognitive majority. A minor who can demonstrate knowledge of their own holdings, articulate their interests, and establish that their expressed preferences have been systematically overridden can petition for partial emancipation of account rights. Not full legal majority. But control of their own finances, independent of guardian approval." Harry was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "That's what I want. The partial emancipation. It requires a test," Ragnarok said. "The bank's assessment of cognitive majority is not simply a matter of articulation, any clever child can talk. We assess magical resonance with the family vaults. We assess the holder's capacity to interface with family magical artifacts. And we require the holder to identify, independently, at least 3 material irregularities in their account management." He slid the ledger across the desk. Harry opened it without hesitation and began reading. He moved at his real speed here, no audience to perform ordinariness for, and his eyes tracked down columns of figures and transactions with the focus of someone who had spent 2 years studying financial documents at the library specifically against this moment. Ragnarok watched him and said nothing. The first irregularity took Harry 40 seconds to find. This transaction, the annual maintenance draw for the Godric's Hollow property. The property was destroyed. It's been drawing maintenance funds for 10 years for a property that doesn't exist in a usable form. "Continue," Ragnarok said, and something in his voice had shifted. Not softer, exactly. More attentive. Second. There are quarterly contributions to a fund labeled Order of the Phoenix Operational Support. My parents' estate is funding an organization that my parents were members of, but that contribution should have terminated upon their deaths unless they made a standing bequest. I don't see a standing bequest in this record. Harry turned 3 pages. Third. The Black family account, there's a notation here about a cross-account stipend. Someone's been drawing from the Potter Trust and routing it to an account I don't recognize. The account number is, he looked at Ragnarok. Is this a ministry account? Ragnarok's expression did not change in any dramatic way. But something behind his eyes did. You found all 3 in under 4 minutes. I also found a 4th, Harry said. But 3 was the requirement. Ragnarok reached across the desk and took the ledger back. He examined the page Harry had stopped on, made a small notation, and closed it with the deliberate care of someone setting a very full cup down without spilling it. He folded his hands. Mr. Potter, he said, I will be frank with you in the way that Gringotts is occasionally frank with clients when it is in both parties' interests to be so. The irregularities you've identified are not oversights. They represent a pattern of account access that has been, in our assessment, outside the scope of standard guardianship. We have flagged concerns to the ministry twice in 9 years. The ministry did not respond. Of course they didn't, Harry said. This came out more flatly than he intended. He moderated it. I appreciate your frankness. What happens now? Now, Ragnarok said, rising from his chair with the fluid efficiency of a creature who was old in the particular way that made age look like an asset, you take the inheritance test. If you pass, and I note that the formality of my saying, if, is purely procedural, we will process your petition for cognitive majority, freeze any further unauthorized draws on the account, and begin documentation for the Wisingamot filing regarding the guardianship. He moved toward a door at the back of the office. Follow me. Harry followed. Fawkes lifted from the chair back and glided alongside him, which the other goblins in the outer office watched with expressions that ranged from professionally blank to nakedly curious. Fawkes was known here. The Phoenix's presence in Gringotts was not unprecedented. Dumbledore had brought him once, years ago, but the Phoenix choosing to sit on an 11-year-old child's chair was unprecedented in a way that the goblins, who tracked precedents carefully, all noticed simultaneously. The inheritance test took place in a room 3 levels below street level, accessed by a cart ride that Harry found genuinely enjoyable, the speed of it, the dark walls rushing past, the deep stone smell of somewhere very far underground. Ragnarok rode with him in the silence of someone who had done this 10,000 times and therefore didn't require commentary. The room itself was circular, with walls that were bare stone and a floor that was inlaid with a complex circular pattern that Harry recognized from one of the memory fragments, House Potter's family seal, expanded and formalized, the family motto worked into the outer ring in Latin, Fortis et Fidelis. Strong and faithful. In the center of the circle was a shallow stone basin, and beside it, a silver knife with a handle carved in the shape of a stag. 3 drops, Ragnarok said. Into the basin. The magic does the rest. Harry picked up the knife. He didn't hesitate over it, he'd known this was coming, had read about it, had thought through it carefully. He made a small clean cut on his left palm, watched 3 drops of blood fall into the basin's water, and waited. The water didn't change color. It moved, the drops spreading outward like ripples and then reversing, contracting, concentrating, and then rising, the water pulling itself upward into a shape. Harry watched it form with the attention he gave everything. A stag first, his father, unmistakable, standing proud and briefly alive in the silver medium before dissolving. Then a doe, and Harry's chest did the complicated thing it did when his mother came into focus from any angle. The doe stood for longer than the stag had. Then it, too, dissolved. What replaced them was not an animal. It was a light, a specific quality of light, the same gold and red he'd been looking at for 8 years on Fawkes's feathers, and it spread outward from the center of the basin until the whole room was saturated with it, and Ragnarok made a sound that Harry had never heard from a goblin before, which was a short, sharp, involuntary intake of breath. "That is not a standard reading," Ragnarok said. "What's a standard reading?" Harry asked. "Family affirmation. Lineage confirmation. Occasionally a manifestation of the family's primary magical quality, intelligence, say, or combat aptitude." Ragnarok looked at the light, which was fading slowly and gracefully. "Phoenix fire manifestation in an inheritance test has not been recorded since the founding of the bank." Harry looked at Fawkes. Fawkes looked back. The phoenix's expression was the one Harry had come to recognize as "I know, and you will too, when the time is right." It was, Harry thought with genuine affection, a very irritating expression, and also one he'd come to find strangely comforting. "Does it change the test result?" Harry asked. "The test result," Ragnarok said, "is unambiguous. You are the heir of the House of Potter with full inheritance rights." He turned back toward the cart. "It does, however, suggest you are owed a visit to the secondary vault. The one I couldn't find records for." "Correct. It predates the main Potter accounts by several generations and has different access conditions. Your blood confirmed eligibility." Ragnarok paused at the cart. "I should mention, in over 3 decades of managing the Potter accounts, I was never instructed to show that vault to any guardian. Because the vault's own protective conditions do not permit guardian access." A beat. "Even Dumbledore asked about it once." "What did you tell him?" "That it did not exist." Ragnarok's expression remained entirely neutral. "Gringotts is loyal to its account holders, Mr. Potter. Always to its account holders." Harry got in the cart. The secondary vault was deeper than the first, accessed by a separate track that went in a direction Harry's sense of geography told him was beneath the Thames. The air changed, warmer, drier, with that faint charge of very old magic that Harry had come to recognize as the smell of power that had been sitting still for a long time. The vault door was not like the main Potter vault's door. It was small, almost modest, and had no handle, no keyhole, no obvious mechanism. Just smooth dark metal and, at its center, a depression in the exact shape of a palm print. Harry placed his hand on it. The warmth that came back was immediate and comprehensive and almost embarrassingly emotional, and Harry stood there for a moment just breathing, because the magic in the door knew him, in the way that Fawkes knew him, with that particular quality of recognition that had nothing to do with appearance or name and everything to do with something more fundamental. It knew his mother and father and their parents and everything that had come before, and it was glad, actually glad, that he had come. The door opened. Inside the vault, not mountains of gold. Not the staggering treasure of Harry's imagination. Something better. Shelves of books, hundreds of them, many in the slightly oversized format of very old magical tomes, their spines labeled in handwriting that changed across the centuries. Books his family had written, collected, annotated. A wooden chest with James Fleamont Potter, personal effects on a card tucked under the latch, still sealed, waiting. Beside it, a smaller box labeled in handwriting Harry knew from a library attic, LEP, research notes. And on the center shelf, at eye height, a letter. It was addressed in his father's handwriting, he knew it from the margins of the textbooks he'd found in the box. Addressed to, Harry, when you're ready. Harry took the letter. He didn't open it there, he put it in his jacket pocket with care and deliberateness, because this was not the place to read it. He took his mother's research notes box. He examined the book systematically, quickly, and selected 6 that the memories flagged as significant. He left everything else exactly as it was because this vault wasn't going anywhere, and he would come back. When he came back out, Ragnarok was waiting by the cart with the patience of a creature for whom time operated differently. "I'd like to come back," Harry said. "The vault is available to you at any time," Ragnarok said. "Alone or accompanied, at your preference." "Alone is fine." Harry looked at the sealed vault door, then back at the goblin. The partial emancipation, how long to process? 48 hours for Gringotts' internal purposes. The formal documentation for the Wisingamot filing will take longer, the ministry will need to be notified, and there is typically a delay between notification and response. What kind of delay? Months, normally, Ragnock said. They got into the cart. However, Gringotts has recently retained a new legal liaison with particular expertise in wrongful imprisonment cases. A witch named Amelia Bones, you may not know the name, but she has some standing in the Wisingamot and a strong professional interest in cases involving process failures. He said this in a tone of such perfect innocence that Harry understood it was anything but. You were waiting for me, Harry said. Ragnock didn't look at him. He was examining the cart's controls. Gringotts has been aware of certain irregularities in the management of your account for 9 years. We were unable to act without the account holder's explicit direction. A pause. We are, however, very good at being ready when direction arrives. Harry looked at the goblin's profile in the rushing dark of the mine cart track, and felt a sudden, genuine warmth for this creature who had managed his family's money with loyalty for 32 years without any expectation of acknowledgement. Thank you, Harry said. He meant it specifically and completely. Ragnock's grip on the cart rail shifted slightly. Thank us when the work is done, Mr. Potter. We have a considerable amount of it ahead of us. Back on the surface, back in the sunlight of Diagon Alley, Harry stood outside Gringotts with Fawkes perched on his shoulder, which was new, the shoulder thing, and slightly heavier than Harry had expected but the warmth more than compensated, and looked at the alley for the first time with his own eyes rather than through the filter of someone else's memories. It was better in person. The memories had given him the layout, the cobblestones, the shop fronts, the smell of cauldron polish and something sweet from a bakery that was definitely magical in some way he couldn't immediately identify, the robe shops, the apothecary, the wand shop at the far end. But they hadn't given him the texture of it, the way the light looked through the awnings, the sound of it, the quality of the air. He stood and took it in for exactly as long as he could afford to before someone spotted the phoenix and started asking questions. He needed a wand. He needed robes. He needed potion supplies and books and an owl for school correspondence, that last item being a matter of practical necessity since he could hardly ask Fawkes to carry his homework queries to professors and also he suspected Fawkes had opinions about being used as post. He pulled out the supply list and did the mental arithmetic against what Ragnock had provided him, a temporary draw on his trust account while the partial emancipation processed, a leather pouch of galleons that was modest by Potter standards but comfortable by any other measure. He also had the letter in his pocket and his mother's research notes box tucked under his arm and 6 inherited books in a bag Ragnock's assistant had provided, and he had precisely one afternoon before he needed to be back at Privet Drive before the Dursleys noticed his absence. He got the robes first, because the Madame Malkin's fitting was the item most likely to involve other people who would see him and potentially report back to anyone who might be watching, and he wanted that encounter on his terms and his timeline. He walked in, gave his name without emphasis, submitted to the measurement process with easy patience, and was halfway through the fitting when the curtain to the next cubicle moved and someone else came in. Blonde. Immaculately dressed. Moving with the slightly affected confidence of someone who had been told their whole life that they were significant. He took one look at Harry's Dudley's hand-me-down clothing and his expression arranged itself into something that was trying to be disinterested and was actually the opposite. Hogwarts, the blonde boy said. Yes, Harry said. First year. Yes. The blonde boy absorbed this. He had blue-gray eyes that were quite sharp behind the aristocratic presentation. Draco Malfoy, he said, with the inflection of someone expecting the name to register. Harry Potter, Harry said, with no inflection at all. The pause that followed was deeply satisfying. Oh, Draco said. His sharp eyes went to Harry's forehead, to the scar that Harry's hair was currently not covering because he hadn't bothered to arrange it that way, and then back to his face. Some calculation was happening visibly behind those eyes, the kind of social recalibration that Harry recognized from watching people discover something didn't fit their expectations. I didn't, you look, I know, Harry said pleasantly. The clothes. I'm aware. Draco's mouth closed. Then, with the instinct of someone raised in a world where admitting a mistake was worse than pretending it hadn't happened, what house do you think you'll be in? I haven't decided, Harry said. Haven't decided? The concept appeared to confuse Draco profoundly. It's not, the Sorting Hat decides, the Sorting Hat considers preferences, Harry said. I've read Hogwarts, a history. The Hat has a long record of honoring strong preferences, particularly in cases of, I think the phrase was, determined self-knowledge. He met Draco's eyes steadily. I haven't decided yet. I like to have all the information first. Another pause. The Madame Malkin's assistant made a small adjustment to Harry's hem and Harry stood still for it without breaking eye contact. Draco Malfoy, Harry noted, was not stupid. He was performing a social role that had been handed to him along with the manner and the name and the expectation, but behind the performance there was someone who was actually paying attention. Someone who was currently paying very close attention indeed. Well, Draco said, after a moment, if you want information, about houses, about the school, my family has been Slytherin for generations. I could, tell me about the Great Hall, Harry said. Not the houses. The room itself, is the ceiling charm always active or is it sometimes just the regular ceiling? Draco blinked. This was evidently not the direction he'd expected. The charm is always active. It reflects the real sky, whatever it is outside. And the tables? Are they fixed or are they movable for special occasions? Fixed, but, why does that? I'm interested in the architecture, Harry said simply. What about the moving staircases, do they have a pattern, or is it random? There's a pattern, Draco said, and something in his expression had shifted from social maneuvering to something more genuine, because apparently no one had ever asked him about the architectural specifics of Hogwarts before and he actually knew quite a lot about them. My father charted it once. There are 15 base configurations but they rotate on a roughly 12-hour cycle with irregularities during what? Significant magical events. Births and deaths of significant magical individuals, that sort of thing. Draco was warming to the subject in spite of himself. My father says the castle itself is a kind of semi-sentient magical construct, it responds to its inhabitants over centuries. Harry filed this away. That's interesting. Does it respond to specific people differently? To powerful ones, probably, Draco said, with the casual certainty of someone who had grown up hearing about magical power hierarchies and absorbed the vocabulary along with everything else. Then he glanced at Fawkes, who had been sitting silently on Harry's shoulder throughout this entire exchange and whom Draco had evidently been trying very hard not to look at. Is that a phoenix? Yes, Harry said. Is it? Whose is it? Mine, Harry said. He said it in the same neutral tone he said everything, but Fawkes chose that moment to ruffle his feathers and let out one low, resonant note that filled the fitting room and made the mirrors vibrate slightly, and Draco Malfoy, despite himself, took a small step back. Harry stepped down from the fitting stool. Thank you, he told the assistant. The robes are excellent. He paid, tucked his package under his arm alongside his mother's research box, and walked out with Fawkes on his shoulder and an expression of perfect serenity. He could feel Draco watching him through the shop window. He didn't look back. Ollivanders was last. Not because it was least important, it was arguably most important, but because Harry had the clear instinct that whatever happened in Ollivanders would be significant, possibly beyond the simple matter of getting a wand, and he wanted everything else settled first. His supplies were sorted. His books were bought, both the school list and several additional volumes he'd identified in the memories as important, including an advanced potions text and a book on magical theory that the Hogwarts list didn't include but that Harry thought it should. His owl was arranged, a beautiful tawny owl with sharp eyes who had regarded Harry from her perch at Elops with the expression of someone who had been waiting for the right person and wasn't going to settle, and had leaned into his hand with the confidence of a decision already made. He'd named her on the spot. Athena felt right. He sent her ahead to Privet Drive with a note written in deliberately cramped handwriting saying, "This bird belongs to my nephew, please leave appropriate feed and do not interfere." It was not a request Petunia could reasonably refuse without acknowledging she knew more about what was happening than she was supposed to, which meant she would comply. Ollivander's was dark inside, in the way that very particular places are dark, not from lack of light but from an abundance of presence, every shelf and every slim box exerting a quiet gravity. The shop smelled of wood shavings and something older, mineral and precise. Garrick Ollivander emerged from between the shelves the way he always apparently did, and his pale eyes found Harry immediately and fixed on him with an intensity that would have been unsettling if Harry hadn't been expecting it. "Mr. Potter," Ollivander said. He looked at the scar. He looked at Fawkes. In that order, and the second look lasted longer. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you. And I see you've brought," he stopped. His expression did something complicated. "That is Fawkes." "Yes," Harry said. "Fawkes chooses his own companionship," Ollivander said slowly. He was still looking at the phoenix with the expression of someone revising a document they thought was final. "He seems to," Harry agreed. Ollivander's gaze moved back to Harry. Whatever he'd been thinking had resolved into something that looked, if not warmer exactly, then more settled. He reached behind the counter. "I know which wand will suit you. I've thought about it for 10 years, actually. I have an instinct for these things, though I'm rarely certain this far in advance." He set a long thin box on the counter. "But before that. The phoenix on your shoulder, when did this begin?" "He came to me when I was 3, Harry said. Another revision happening behind those pale eyes. 3. I see. He opened the box. "Mr. Potter, I sold 2 wands that share a core. Twin cores, from the same phoenix. I know whose wand is the other." "I know too," Harry said. Ollivander's hand stilled on the wand box. "Do you?" "Voldemort's wand," Harry said. He said the name without dropping his voice or hesitating, the way other people apparently did with it, not as performance, but because he had long since decided that fear of a word was the first step toward fear of a person, and he was not going to do Voldemort that courtesy. 11 inches. You. Phoenix feather. You told him he would do great, terrible, things with it. A beat. You were right. But the phoenix who donated the core is sitting on my shoulder right now, which means the wand he donated the second feather to is, Holly, Ollivander said, lifting the wand from the box. 11 inches. Supple. And yes, the core is from Fawkes. He held it out. The connection between twin-core wands is well documented. What is less documented is what happens when one wand's owner is, reduced in power. Whether the remaining wand changes. He was watching Harry's face carefully. "Give it a try." Harry took the wand. The warmth was immediate and total, not dramatic, no rush of wind or shower of sparks, just a deep resonance, like a note played on an instrument that was also somehow in your chest, a rightness that was physical and magical and entirely unambiguous. Fawkes made a sound. Harry looked at the wand, which looked back at him in the particular way that objects which belong to you look back, as if they were waiting for you to realize it. He gave it a small, intentional flick, and a cascade of red and gold sparks rose from the tip and spread across the dark ceiling of the shop like a miniature aurora, glowing for a moment before fading. "Yes," Ollivander said quietly. He had the look of someone watching something they'd been wondering about for a decade finally resolve. "I thought so." He was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Potter, I'm going to tell you something that may be premature. Or perhaps not. The bond between wand and phoenix, when they are from the same creature, is unusual. Most wizards' wands contain a magical core that is of the creature but no longer connected to the creature. In your case, I'm not entirely certain that distinction applies." Harry looked at Fawkes. Fawkes looked back. The amber eyes were warm and completely unsurprised. "Because he chose me," Harry said. "It's not just a wand with a feather. It's," He chose the feather too. I believe so, Ollivander said. He was watching with an expression that Harry recognized, one he'd seen in Ragnarok and in the mirror when he looked at himself after particularly long sessions of working through something complicated, the look of someone in the presence of a problem they find genuinely interesting. I have been in this business for a very long time, and I have never seen a phoenix attend a wand selection. Is it a problem? Harry asked. Quite the contrary, Ollivander said. He boxed the wand, Harry kept hold of it, and Ollivander wrapped the box around the hand holding it rather than ask him to let go, a small gesture that Harry noticed and catalogued. It's the most interesting thing I've seen in 30 years. He named a price that Harry paid, and added, "Good luck, Mr. Potter. Though I suspect luck is somewhat beside the point with you." Harry walked back out into Diagon Alley with his wand in his hand and the afternoon light touching the cobblestones gold, and stopped on the pavement for a moment just standing in it. The sun was warm. Fawkes was warm on his shoulder. The wand was warm in his hand. He was 11 years old and surrounded by a world that had arranged itself, for a long time, to make him small. He thought about his mother's letter, I might be wrong, and the research notes under his arm, and his father's letter still unopened in his pocket, and Sirius Black in Azkaban, and 41 memory blocks that someone had worked very hard and with considerable magical skill to put in place. He thought about Dumbledore's voice in the fragments, saying he must be willing. Right, Harry said quietly, not to anyone in particular. Let's get on with it, then. He read his father's letter that night. He waited until the Dursleys were asleep, waited for the last creak of Vernon's footsteps, the final flush of the upstairs bathroom, the silence that settled over the house like a habit, and then he sat in the small puddle of his bedside lamp's light with the letter in his hands and carefully opened it. His father's handwriting was untidy in an energetic way, each letter committing fully to its shape with no second guessing. Harry, I'm writing this and trying not to think too hard about the circumstances that mean you're reading it without me there to explain it. I'm going to try to keep this practical. Your mother would say that means I'm going to ramble and eventually get to the practical bits, and she's probably right. First, we loved you. This is not the last time you'll hear it, but it's the first and it's important. We loved you spectacularly. You were 3 months old when I wrote this and already you had Lily's eyes and my hair and this quality of paying attention that we both agree is slightly alarming in someone who can't walk yet. Practical things. There's a second vault. Ragnarok will have shown you. In it is your mother's research, her private work, not her published papers, the stuff she was doing in the last 2 years before, the research she didn't tell Dumbledore about because she didn't want him managing it. She'd discovered something about the nature of Voldemort's unusual resilience that she didn't want in official channels yet. If you're reading this and things went badly, those notes matter. Find someone brilliant to help you with them, because your mother was 3 levels of brilliant above everyone around her and her notes will need another brilliant person to decode. About Dumbledore. I've spent 6 years being fond of him and the last year being uncertain of him, and I'm going to be honest about that uncertainty. He's not cruel. I want you to understand that, he's not Voldemort, he's not evil, he's just very certain he's right, and people who are very certain they're right sometimes do things that people who aren't so certain would hesitate over. I think he's made plans around you. I think those plans involve not telling you about them. I think that's wrong, even if his reasons are good, even if he's right about the larger picture. You deserve to know your own story. So here's what I know, Sirius didn't do it. Whatever you've been told, Sirius would not do that. I know him the way I know my own hands. If he's been blamed, he's been framed, and the person who framed him is Peter Pettigrew, who I trusted and shouldn't have and who I'll regret with everything I have if I'm not around to fix it. Find Sirius. Find him wherever they've put him. He would do anything for you. One more thing. The prophecy. Dumbledore will tell you about it at some point, framed in a particular way. Ask him who else heard it first. Ask him what was done about the person who heard it. Ask him whether he told your mother and me the full content, or a version of it designed to produce a specific response from us. Ask him those questions and watch his face. I was going to end with something wise and fatherly. I've been staring at the page for 10 minutes and what I actually want to say is, be brave and be kind and be yourself loudly, because the world will try to make you quiet, and you are a Potter and we are not quiet. I love you, Harry. I love you, I love you, I love you. Dad. P.S. The flying motorbike is actually in a garage in Bristol. The address is in your vault. Sirius would want you to have it. Harry sat very still for a while with the letter in his hands. Outside, a car went past on Privet Drive, its headlights sweeping briefly across his ceiling. He folded the letter along its original creases and put it back in its envelope and put the envelope between the covers of his mother's research notes, which he hadn't opened yet because he was saving them. He was saving them for someone brilliant to help with, as his father had said. He had a person in mind. He'd identified her already from the memories, not a specific memory, but a general shape of the future, a name repeated in contexts that suggested significance. He'd know her when he met her. He turned off his lamp. In the dark, Fawkes was a warm presence on the curtain rail. Harry could feel him without looking, could feel the warmth, could feel the quiet companionship of something ancient choosing to be here, in this small house in this unremarkable suburb, because he was here. Dad said Sirius knew him the way he knew his own hands, Harry said quietly. Fawkes made a sound. Has anyone checked on him? Since. Is he, a sound that meant alive? Just alive. Right. Harry stared at the ceiling. I'll fix that. Not yet, but I will. He paused. Dad would have liked you. The Phoenix thing. He'd have thought it was brilliant. Fawkes sang a single quiet note, so low it was barely sound, more vibration than music, and Harry felt it in his sternum like something warm taking up the space that grief had cleared out. He slept. The summer passed in a productive blur. The partial emancipation processed in 36 hours, faster than the predicted 48, which Ragnarok attributed to the clarity of the account irregularities and the complete absence of any reasonable counterargument. Harry received a formal notification from Gringotts addressed, pointedly, to him directly, informing him that his accounts were now under his independent management, and a copy had been sent to the Ministry of Magic and to the Guardian of Record, one Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. He did not hear from Dumbledore. He had expected to. He had prepared for it with the thoroughness he brought to everything, had rehearsed a dozen versions of that conversation in his head while walking to the library, had considered angles and responses and the things he would and wouldn't say. He was ready. The silence that came instead was more interesting. Dumbledore knew. Dumbledore had received the notification and had chosen, for now, to say nothing. Harry sat with the implications of that silence for several days, turning them over, and arrived at a conclusion that felt right. Dumbledore was reassessing. Something had gone differently than he'd planned, not catastrophically, not yet, but differently enough to require recalculation. And Dumbledore was the kind of man who recalculated before moving. Which meant Harry had a window before Dumbledore moved. He spent the rest of the summer reading his mother's research notes. His father had been right, they were extraordinary. Lily Potter had not been studying dark magic, exactly. She'd been studying the mechanism by which magic survived significant physical trauma, with particular attention to cases where a caster's magical signature persisted after the caster's death. Her notes were dense and cross-referenced and occasionally written in a shorthand that had taken Harry a week to decode, and what they pointed toward was a theory she had labeled, with her characteristic directness, residual anchor points. The theory, as far as Harry could work it out, was this: in certain circumstances, a magical caster could, intentionally or not, embed a fragment of their magical essence into an object. Not their soul, in the theological sense. Not their ghost, in the wandering at Hogwarts sense. Something more specific and more troubling, a functional fragment, enough magical identity to maintain certain forms of magical continuity, including, potentially, a degree of consciousness. Enough to persist. Enough to be unkillable by conventional means, because you couldn't kill what wasn't entirely alive. His mother had written in the margin of her final page, "V, this must be what V has done." Not once. Multiple times. The magical drain required would be immense, the cost, what could produce that kind of anchor? And below that, in slightly messier handwriting, as if written quickly, murder. Of course. The act of killing creates a rupture in magical reality, a magical fissure. If someone were to deliberately exploit that fissure. If they were to push a piece of themselves through it. Oh God! Harry set the notes down. He sat in the quiet of his room for a long time, thinking about what kind of woman looked at evidence like that and wrote "Oh God" and then kept going, kept researching, kept trying to find the answer, not because someone asked her to but because she couldn't stop, because that's who she was, because knowing a terrible thing was better than not knowing it and therefore being unable to prevent it. He thought about her letter to Petunia, the one about Dumbledore. "I might be wrong." "You were never wrong about anything that mattered," he said aloud, to no one. To her. Then he picked up the notes and kept reading. By the time September 1st came, Harry Potter had read everything in his mother's notes twice. He had cross-referenced it with 3 books from the secondary vault and 1 volume from his supplemental Diagon Alley purchases. He had a working hypothesis, a partial list of what needed to happen, and a clear-eyed understanding of the shape of the problem ahead. He also had a trunk packed with organized efficiency, a phoenix who showed up punctually on September 1st at 7 in the morning and sat on the window ledge looking expectant, and a letter from Ragnarok confirming that the documentation for the Wisengamot petition regarding Sirius Black's unlawful imprisonment had been completed and was waiting for the right moment to file. The right moment, Ragnarok had written in a postscript that was as close to editorializing as Harry had ever seen from him, will likely present itself soon. Institutions such as the Wisengamot tend to be most receptive to petitions when the petitioner has recently demonstrated both standing and leverage. "We recommend patience." Harry had written back, noted. "Working on the standing and leverage. How's the case looking?" Ragnarok's reply had been 3 words, devastatingly well documented. Harry smiled, which he did selectively and therefore entirely genuinely, and packed the letter in his trunk beside his father's letter and his wand case and his mother's research notes and the 6 inherited books and the advanced potions text and the magical theory volume and the brand new copy of Hogwarts, a history that he bought because it seemed important to own rather than borrow. He went downstairs. He ate breakfast. He was not going to thank the Dursleys for anything in particular, but he had decided, with the practical fairness he tried to apply to most things, to give Vernon a nod as he left, an acknowledgement of the functional, if not warm, arrangement they'd arrived at. Vernon received this nod with the expression of someone who had decided that a safe distance was the appropriate response to most of what Harry represented, and gave a small, awkward nod back. Petunia didn't come out of the kitchen. Harry stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he walked to the kitchen doorway. Petunia was at the sink, her back to him, very carefully washing a single cup. "I found Mum's letters," Harry said. "In the attic." Petunia's hands stilled. "I read them." A pause. "She missed you." The quality of Petunia's stillness changed. Her spine shifted, barely perceptibly, from defensive to something else, something that might, if given time and space, have become the shape of a feeling she'd been keeping out of her kitchen for 20 years. She didn't turn around. Harry waited a moment. Then he said, "I'll be okay," because it was true and because she needed to hear it, even if she didn't know how to respond to it. He wasn't forgiving her, that was a different and more complex process that didn't need resolving this morning, but he wasn't carrying it anymore either. He was setting it down right here in the doorway, because he had a train to catch and a war to eventually win, and carrying other people's decisions about how to treat him was not an efficient use of energy. He picked up his trunk and walked out. King's Cross Station was loud and ordinary and smelled of diesel and fast food, and Harry navigated it with a trolley and a sense of purposeful calm, Athena's cage balanced on top of the trunk, the wand case in his jacket pocket. He walked through the barrier between platforms 9 and 10 without breaking stride. He'd read the instructions, He knew the mechanism, the only drama was in not expecting drama, and the Hogwarts Express was there on the other side, enormous and red and breathing steam, and Harry stopped for one moment on the platform to look at it. He had earned this. Not in the way Dumbledore had intended, not through deprivation and smallness and the careful construction of someone who had been made willing. He had earned it his own way, which was through 8 years of reading and thinking and preparing and refusing, absolutely and completely and at every opportunity, to be what someone else needed him to be. He found a compartment, loaded his trunk, sat down, and waited. He was ready. Bring on the year. Chapter 3, The Platform and the Problem. The compartment filled with steam and noise and the particular chaos of hundreds of children arriving at a train that was leaving whether they were ready or not, and Harry sat in the middle of it with his legs crossed and a book open on his knee, and the specific quality of stillness that he'd developed over years of making himself invisible in a house that wanted him to be invisible. The difference now was that the stillness was chosen. He watched the platform through the window. Families clustered in complicated emotional configurations, mothers gripping children's arms too long, fathers giving the particular nod of men who didn't know how to say things directly, older siblings managing the dual performance of embarrassment and love. It was genuinely interesting, the variety of it, the 1,000 small dramas playing out in the steam and noise. He saw a large red-haired family moving down the platform like a cheerful weather system, tall, loud, visibly warm with each other, at least 5 children by his count with what looked like more to come. A mother in emerald green robes was pressing sandwiches into bags with the urgency of someone who had done this before and knew it would be forgotten the moment the train moved. He filed the family away. Weasley, the memory said, orienting around the red hair and the numbers. Arthur. Molly. Many children. Order of the Phoenix. Good people. He saw a dark-haired girl walking alone with a trolley she was navigating with aggressive competence, her trunk perfectly balanced, a cat in a basket and a stack of books visible through the top of her bag. She moved without waiting for anyone to help her, with the self-sufficient confidence of someone who had decided that not needing help was the safest working assumption. She glanced at the compartments as she passed, assessing. Her eyes paused briefly on Harry's window, on Harry, who was looking back, and she gave him a single evaluating look before moving on. He recognized her from the evaluating look alone. He got up, went to the compartment door, and said, "There's room in here." The girl stopped. She turned. The evaluating look again, more deliberate now, taking in the phoenix feather visible in Harry's hair. Fawkes had developed the habit of leaving them, and Harry had stopped trying to remove them, and the book, and the stillness. "I'm Hermione Granger," she said. "Are you Harry Potter?" "Yes," he said. "I've read about you," she said. Not with the breathless quality that he suspected some people would bring to that sentence. With the tone of someone noting a fact that they considered relevant context. "You're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century. None of which are particularly accurate," Harry said. This gave her a slight pause. "Then, no, they're not, actually. I noticed several inconsistencies." "Are you saying that from personal knowledge or from research?" "Both," Harry said. "Come in." She came in. She loaded her trunk with efficient speed, settled her cat's basket on the seat, and sat down with the posture of someone who had grown up being told to sit up straight and had eventually made it their own. She looked at Fawkes on the overhead rack. "Is that a phoenix?" "Yes. They're extraordinarily rare. Most texts say they're uncapturable, they bond voluntarily or not at all." She was looking at Fawkes with undisguised fascination. "How did you? He chose me," Harry said. "When I was 3. Hermione opened her mouth, then closed it, making the specific expression of someone who has approximately 15 questions and is determining which to ask first. She settled on, "How much of what's in those books is actually wrong?" Harry leaned back. "How much time do you have?" "The ride is roughly 6 hours, Hermione said, pulling a notebook from her bag. It was nearly full. She flipped to a blank page. "What should I actually know?" This was the moment Harry had been imagining, in various forms, for years. Not the conversation itself, he couldn't have predicted the specifics, but the quality of it, the finding of the right person to have it with. His father had said find someone brilliant. And here she was, notebook open, pen ready, looking at him with eyes that were sharp and curious and entirely unafraid. He started talking. He didn't tell her everything, that would take considerably longer than 6 hours, and there were things that required more trust than a single train ride could establish. But he told her the accurate history, Voldemort's actual origins, the chamber of missing context around the prophecy, the inadequacy of the accounts available to the general public. He explained his mother's research, in outline, not in detail. He told her that certain very important questions about the magical world's recent past hadn't been asked properly, and that he intended to ask them. Hermione took notes. She asked questions that were consistently more sophisticated than he'd anticipated, which said something given how high he'd set his anticipations. Twice she corrected something he'd said, not aggressively, but with the matter-of-fact confidence of someone who had read the source material and noticed a discrepancy, and both times she was right, and Harry said so without any of the defensiveness that sometimes accompanied admissions of being wrong in other people. "You're not defensive about being corrected," she observed. "Being wrong is information," Harry said. "Why would I be defensive about information?" She looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone who had just recognized something. "I read something once, I don't remember where, about a study on gifted learners. The ones who were most successful long-term were the ones who treated errors as data rather than judgments." She was quiet a moment. "Most people I've tried to talk to about books get defensive when I correct them. Most people conflate their ideas with themselves," Harry said. "It's a common problem. The idea being wrong doesn't mean the person is wrong. Unless they persist in the wrong idea after being corrected," Hermione said. "Well, yes. Then there's a character problem." She smiled. It was a quick smile, not performed, the smile of someone recognizing a satisfying piece of logic and responding to it honestly. Harry filed it away. Hermione Granger's honest smile versus her social smile would be different, and it was worth knowing which was which. "What are you hoping to do at Hogwarts?" she asked. "Several things," Harry said. "Learn magic properly. Find out what's happened to things that should have been handled and weren't. Start the process of fixing them." He looked out the window at the countryside accelerating past. "And I need to know what's in the third-floor corridor." Hermione looked up from her notebook. "What?" "Dumbledore put something there. Something that shouldn't be at a school. I'd like to know what it is before it becomes relevant." He met her eyes. "You're going to be brilliant at Hogwarts. I mean that specifically, not as flattery. The way you think, you'll be ahead of the coursework from the first week. I'd like your help with some things, if you're willing." She studied him. The evaluating look again, serious and direct. "What kind of things?" "Research, primarily. My mother's notes, they're in a shorthand I've partially decoded, but some of it requires a different kind of mind than mine. I'm good at systems and strategy. You're good at connections and deep analysis. They're different skills that complement each other." "You've known me for 40 minutes, Hermione said. "Yes," Harry agreed. "But I'm very accurate about people." Another pause. "Then, what was your mother researching?" "Something that might be the most important piece of magical theory of the last century," Harry said. "I'll tell you more when I know you better." "That's fair," she said. She looked at Fawkes again, who was watching her with amber eyes that she seemed to find simultaneously compelling and slightly unnerving. "The Phoenix. Does he do anything useful?" "I read that Phoenix song has healing properties. He does a great many things," Harry said. "We're still working out the full scope." As if this were a cue, and with Fawkes, Harry had learned, it might genuinely have been, the Phoenix spread his wings once, slowly, and sang a single long note that was so beautiful it stopped Hermione mid-thought. She sat very still while it lasted and for several seconds after, looking slightly stunned. "Oh," she said quietly. "Yes," Harry agreed. The compartment door slid open at roughly the 3-hour mark. Harry had been expecting this, or something like this. He looked up from the potions theory discussion he and Hermione were having over her notes and a book she'd produced from her bag. Two boys, both large in the way of people who had recently started growing and hadn't quite gotten control of it yet. Behind them, barely visible, a round-faced boy with the look of someone who had been dragged along rather than invited. Harry recognized all three from the memory's general framework: Crabbe, Goyle, and Neville Longbottom, the last of whom was already looking like he regretted being in the corridor. But in front of them, because there was always a front, with an arrangement like this, was Draco Malfoy, who had apparently decided that the train ride was the appropriate venue for a social call. "Found you," Draco said to Harry, with the tone of someone who considers this an achievement worth noting. His eyes moved to Hermione, assessed her with the efficiency of someone raised to sort people quickly, and found some category for her that made him look slightly dismissive. Then his eyes went to Fawkes, and the dismissiveness wavered. "Malfoy," Harry said mildly. "I thought I'd see how you were getting on." Draco's eyes returned to Harry. "Made any decisions about houses?" "Still gathering information," Harry said. He glanced at the two large boys in the doorway. "Are those your friends or your escort?" Crabbe and Goyle looked confused. Draco's expression did a quick complex thing. "They're, because they haven't introduced themselves," Harry continued, "and the round-faced boy behind them looks like he's hoping to disappear through the floor, so I'm going to assume the social dynamic here is somewhat one-directional." Draco's expression reset. He looked at Neville with a kind of reflexive assessment that was clearly habitual and not particularly intentional. "That's Longbottom." He lost his toad. "I know," Harry said. He looked past Draco at Neville. "Neville Longbottom?" Neville blinked. He had the expression of someone surprised to be addressed by name rather than category. "Yes. Trevor usually turns up in the bathroom by the third carriage," Harry said. He had no memory of reading that specifically, but Fawkes had ruffled at exactly the right moment as they passed the third carriage earlier, and Harry had learned to track those moments. "Third door on the left, there's a loose floor panel he likes apparently." Neville stared at him. "How do you, worth checking," Harry said simply. Neville nodded, with the uncertain gratitude of someone processing kindness from an unexpected direction, and navigated out from between Crabbe and Goyle with the relief of someone escaping a tide. Harry watched him go, then looked back at Draco, who was reassessing something. "You're not what people expected," Draco said. "I know," Harry said. What people expected was someone who'd grown up. Draco stopped. He had some awareness of what he'd been about to say and some awareness that it was potentially impolitic, and he'd caught himself before landing on it. This, Harry noted, was actually a meaningful piece of character information. Draco Malfoy was not thoughtless. Someone who'd grown up without any idea what they were, Harry finished for him, with no inflection. Small and confused and easy to orient. He held Draco's gaze. "I know what that expectation was. I know where it came from. I'm not going to be annoyed at you for the expectation. You're not responsible for other people's plans." A pause. "What do you actually think?" "Not what you've been told to think." "What do you actually make of it?" Draco blinked. This was evidently not how conversations with Harry were supposed to go. He was recalibrating visibly. "I think," he said, slowly, with the care of someone who didn't often speak without the script, "that Hogwarts is going to be more interesting than my father told me it would be." "That's a very diplomatic answer," Harry said. "I'm very diplomatic," Draco said. Something in his expression had shifted, the performance layer thinning slightly. "Crabbe, Goyle, go find seats. I'll come back in a bit." Crabbe and Goyle, who had followed approximately 40% of the conversation, shuffled off. Draco stepped into the compartment uninvited and sat down with the casual assurance of someone who was used to this not being refused. Hermione looked at him and then at Harry. Harry gave her the microscopic indication of "this is fine, let it play." "You're Hermione Granger," Draco said to her. Not dismissively this time. More like someone correcting their own first impression. "Yes," she said. "Muggle-born," he said. It was a statement, not an inflection, and Harry watched carefully for what grade of inflection would follow. There was none. Just acknowledgement. "Yes," Hermione said again, with the quality of someone prepared for a fight they'd apparently determined was not, in this specific instance, being invited. "My father says Muggleborns," Draco started, and then stopped, and Harry saw the exact moment he realized he'd started a sentence without knowing how it was supposed to end and that the instinctive ending was going to sound one way to him and another way to the two people watching him. He reconfigured. "My father has views. I'm forming my own." This was not nothing, Harry decided. This was actually something. Draco Malfoy was 12 years old and sitting in a compartment with Harry Potter and a Muggleborn witch and consciously choosing to edit his father's narrative rather than simply perform it. That was a person who could be reached. "Who taught you about magical architecture?" Harry asked. Draco looked at him. The subject change had been intentional and he'd registered it. "My father, mostly. And my mother, she knows more about actual magical theory. My father's more interested in applications." "What does your mother know about family magic?" "The old kind, pre-ministry codification." Draco's eyes sharpened. "Quite a lot, actually." "Why?" "Because I'm interested in magical theory," Harry said, "and most of the current coursework is relatively recent. The deeper mechanisms are in the older sources and the older sources are mostly in family libraries." He looked at Draco evenly. "The Malfoy Library is significant. One of the best in Britain," Draco said, with a pride that was genuine rather than performed. "I don't doubt it," Harry said, and meant it. They rode in something that was not quite friendship but was considerably more interesting than its alternative, the three of them talking in overlapping currents, Hermione on magical theory and historical record, Draco on family knowledge and practical application, Harry directing the conversation with the particular skill of someone who understood that information flows best when people feel they're contributing rather than being extracted from. He learned a great deal. He gave away very little. And by the end of it, Draco Malfoy got up to return to his own compartment with the expression of someone who had gone somewhere intending one thing and come away with something considerably different. At the door he turned. "Potter. The sorting. It matters." "I know it does," Harry said. "What I mean is, your name. There are people who'll expect it to go a certain way." "I know that too," Harry said. "Don't worry about my sorting, Malfoy. Worry about your own." Draco looked at him for a moment. Then he left. Hermione closed her notebook. "What was that?" "The beginning of something," Harry said. "Or not. We'll see." He looked out the window. The countryside had shifted, darker now, more dramatic, hills rising against a sky that was starting to move toward evening. "He's not his father." "No," Hermione agreed, in a tone that suggested she was withholding significant judgment for future reassessment. "He's not. Yet. People become their context unless they choose not to," Harry said. He was choosing just then. Not completely, not all the way. But he was making the choice. It's worth noting. You're very interested in people's decision points. Decisions are where everything actually happens, Harry said. Actions are just decisions you've already made. He stretched, rolled his shoulders. Eat something. We'll be there in 2 hours and you'll want to be sharp for the sorting. Are you nervous? Hermione asked. She asked it with genuine curiosity, not as a test. Harry considered this. No, he said. I'm curious. He looked at Fawkes, who was preening with magnificent unconcern. There's a difference. The boats across the Black Lake were cold and beautiful, and Harry sat in them with Neville Longbottom, who had found Trevor in exactly the place Harry had suggested, which had produced an expression of wondering gratitude that Harry suspected Neville didn't deploy very often, and 2 other first years whose names he learned in the boat, a girl called Millicent Bulstrode who was quiet and watchful, and a boy called Justin Finch Fletchley who was muggle-born and magnificently unbothered. About it, talking about the castle with the unaffected enthusiasm of someone seeing something extraordinary for the first time. "It's bigger than my school," Justin said, looking up at Hogwarts against the dark sky. "Considerably bigger." "How many students are there?" "About 300, usually," Harry said. "And it's all just magic?" "The whole thing?" "The moving staircases, the paintings, the ceiling in the Great Hall reflects the real sky," Neville offered, with the careful sharing of someone who knew things and didn't often get to contribute them. "My gran told me. It's bewitched. Like a living structure," Harry said. He was looking up at the castle with the same attention he gave everything significant. He could feel it, actually feel it, which he had half expected from what Draco had said, but the reality of it was still remarkable. The castle had a presence, a weight of accumulated magic that pressed gently against his awareness like a vast and patient mind noting his arrival. He pressed back, lightly, the way you might knock on a door to say "I know you're there." Something in the castle, he couldn't have described exactly what, but it was there, knocked back. Justin was still talking about the ceiling. Neville was listening and contributing and becoming, visibly, slightly more sure of himself with each exchange. Harry noticed this and said nothing, just kept the conversation open and moving in his direction. The boats docked. They were ushered into the entrance hall by a tall witch with the bearing of someone who had done this hundreds of times and found it neither tedious nor exciting, simply significant. Professor McGonagall, with silver-streaked hair and spectacles and a quality of precision in every movement that Harry respected immediately and instinctively. She explained the sorting in crisp, functional terms. Several first years looked panicked. Harry looked interested. He caught Hermione's eyes across the group and she looked back with the expression of someone practicing being calm, which wasn't quite the same as being calm, and he gave her the small nod of "You're fine, you know everything, stop worrying," and she visibly settled half a degree. The Great Hall was exactly as the memories and Draco's descriptions had prepared him for, and still more than both of them. The ceiling was a dark October sky churning with the beginning of what looked like weather, and the candles floated at their posts with the serene indifference of things that had been burning here for centuries and would be burning here for centuries more. The 4 tables ran long and golden-lit. The teacher's table at the top ran shorter and perpendicular, and Harry looked at it without appearing to look at it, locating faces. Quirrell, turbaned, who twitched too much. Snape, who looked at Harry with the intensity of someone who had been waiting for this specific moment for a decade and had prepared several different responses. McGonagall, who had come from the entrance hall and was now at the teacher's table with the smooth efficiency of someone who moved well. And at the center, long silver beard, blue eyes behind half-moon spectacles, an expression of benevolent attention that was absolutely real and absolutely also a performance, because it was both things, and Dumbledore was the kind of man who had long since made peace with the fact. Dumbledore looked at Harry. Harry looked back. The eye contact lasted perhaps 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Harry knew, several things passed between them that had nothing to do with words. Dumbledore registering that Harry was looking at him rather than at the room, that Harry was not wide-eyed or overwhelmed, that Harry's expression was one of calm assessment rather than wonder. And Harry registering something in Dumbledore's eyes that was not what he'd expected, not guilt, not calculation, but a complex and genuine emotion that was something close to concern. Not for a plan. For a person. Which was, actually, the most unsettling thing about Albus Dumbledore. He wasn't a villain. He cared, genuinely and deeply. He was just very, very certain that his caring justified his methods. Harry looked away first, not because he was cowed, but because he'd learned what he needed to learn from those 3 seconds, and continuing would be a form of statement he wasn't ready to make publicly yet. The Sorting Hat's song was longer than Harry expected and smarter than the memory fragments had suggested. The hat was genuinely wise, in the way that things that had absorbed centuries of human experience became wise, and its song this year was edged with something that might have been warning or might have been anticipation. For what comes after always shall depend on where you stand when everything must bend. Harry thought about those two lines while the hat was placed on the first head and made its first declaration, and decided that the hat had opinions about the current state of things and was choosing a particular venue to express them. The alphabet moved forward. Names called, children walking, the hat sitting for varying lengths of time on varying heads. Some quick, some long. Neville Longbottom walked up with the expression of someone approaching a cliff edge, sat down, and the hat was on his head for less than 3 seconds. Gryffindor, the hat said, with a decisiveness that made Neville blink in surprised pleasure. Harry watched him find his way to the Gryffindor table, watched the reception, warm, red and gold, people moving to make room, and watched the slight squaring of Neville's shoulders when someone made space for him. Small things mattered. Potter, Harry. The hall went from its normal ambient noise to a silence so absolute you could hear the candle flames. Harry walked to the stool. He was aware, completely, precisely aware, of every eye in the room, of Dumbledore's carefully neutral face, of Snape's coiled intensity, of Hermione watching from her place in the line with an expression of wanting to take notes. He sat down. The hat descended. In the darkness under the hat's brim, a voice spoke, a dry, thoughtful, ancient voice that had been doing this since before anyone in this hall had been born. Well, the hat said. Now this is something. Harry waited. Considerable intelligence. Considerable courage. Loyalty of the kind that has to be earned before it can be given, that's unusual at 11, most children your age haven't worked out the distinction. Ambition, yes, though yours is of the kind that points outward rather than up, you want to change things rather than rise. And underneath all of it, something I've only felt a handful of times in 1,000 years. What's that? Harry thought. Purpose. Not a goal. Not a plan, though you have those too. I mean purpose, the bone-level kind, the kind that doesn't need to be told what to do because it already knows. The kind that comes from knowing who you are before anyone told you. A pause. Harry was aware that the hall's silence had deepened in the way that silences deepen when they go on longer than expected. You know where you want to be, the hat said. You're not asking me to decide. You're asking me to confirm. Not quite, Harry thought. I'm asking you to be honest about what you see. The hat was quiet for a moment. Honesty. Good. Then honestly, you would excel in any house. You have the components. What you don't have, what you've chosen not to have, is a ceiling. And only one house has historically understood that ceilings are optional. Harry felt it before the hat said it, the way you feel the weight of something settling into its right place. Gryffindor. The hall exploded. Not with the normal cheer of a house gaining a member, with the accumulated release of a held breath, with the particular energy of hundreds of people simultaneously deciding how they felt about something they'd been braced for. The Gryffindor table was on its feet. Harry walked to it with the measured step of someone who was genuinely pleased but not performing it, found a seat across from Ron Weasley, whom he recognized from the platform's weather system family, who had an expression of pure uncomplicated delight. Knew it'd be Gryffindor, Ron announced to no one in particular. My whole family's Gryffindor, but, the Phoenix, he added, as Fawkes glided in through the open hall doors and settled on the back of Harry's chair as though it had been reserved. Is that a Phoenix? His name is Fawkes, Harry said. The noise level around them went up by a third. Fawkes ignored this entirely. Harry looked back at the sorting line in time to see Hermione Granger sit down, have the hat on her head for 10 seconds, which Harry suspected was more time than it needed and less time than Hermione preferred, and be declared Gryffindor with a certainty that made the hat's brim seem slightly pleased with itself. She sat 2 seats down from Harry and immediately produced her notebook. He noticed Dumbledore's face during the feast. Not staring at it, glancing, with the peripheral precision he'd trained over years. The headmaster's expression was performing warmth for the table and the students, which it genuinely felt, while behind it something else was working, something that moved behind the blue eyes the way weather moves behind glass. Assessment. Recalculation. Harry ate, and talked to Ron Weasley about the feast food because Ron was both entertaining and genuinely informative about wizarding food culture in a way that textbooks weren't, and let Dumbledore recalculate. He was patient. He had been patient for 8 years. He could afford to be patient for whatever time it took for Dumbledore to decide how to approach the situation. And in the meantime, there was Hogwarts, the actual Hogwarts, the castle that had knocked back when he knocked, the staircases and the magic and the things that needed doing, and Harry intended to be entirely busy with all of it. After the feast, the prefects led them out. Harry followed and said very little, moving through the castle's entrance hall and up the first staircase with his eyes and his sense of the place working simultaneously. The castle was paying attention to him. He could feel it in the slight warmth of the stone under his hand when he touched the banister, in the way one particular corridor torch flared slightly as he passed, in the quality of presence that suggested the building was orienting to him the way a plant orients to light. Not dramatically. Just noting. Percy Weasley, as prefect, was delivering the password for the Gryffindor common room with the particular gravity of someone for whom passwords were a matter of serious institutional importance. Harry half listened and half felt the portrait hole's magic, old, settled, the fat lady's enchantment woven into the stone itself over centuries. The common room was warm and red and genuinely pleasant, and Harry stood in it for a moment just appreciating it as a fact before going to find his dormitory. The dormitory had 5 beds. He chose the one nearest the window without any particular sentiment, unpacked what he needed for the night with efficient speed, and was getting ready to read when Ron Weasley appeared in the doorway of the bathroom looking at him with the particular expression of someone who has been working up to a question for several hours. "Can I ask, the Phoenix?" Ron said. "Fawkes," Harry said. "Yes. He was Dumbledore's," Ron said. "Everyone knows that. I mean, my mum's mentioned him. He's famous, sort of. Among people who know things." Ron sat on his own bed across the room with the comfortable looseness of someone for whom sitting was never a formal activity. "How did you end up with a phoenix that used to live with Dumbledore?" "He chose," Harry said. "He came to me when I was 3. He wasn't sent. He went on his own." Ron absorbed this. He was working with it honestly, turning it over, not performing understanding he didn't have. And Dumbledore just let him go. "Didn't have much choice," Harry said. "You can't keep a phoenix that's decided to be somewhere else." "What does he do?" "I mean, my mum's books say phoenixes can carry enormous weights, and the feathers have healing properties, and the song, all true," Harry said. "But mostly he looked at Fawkes, who was on the headboard now, watching them both with the amber eyes. "Here." Ron looked at Fawkes for a moment. Fawkes looked back. Something passed between them that Harry didn't fully understand but noted, a quality of recognition, Ron's face going slightly softer, less performing casual. "Yeah," Ron said quietly. "I can see that." They were quiet for a moment, the comfortable kind. "Did you really say Voldemort's name at dinner?" Neville said from the doorway of the bathroom, where he'd apparently been listening. "I heard," some of the older years were saying. "Yes," Harry said. "Just like that?" "Yes." Harry looked at Neville. "He's a person. Terrible things have happened because of him, but he's still a person with a name, and I'm not going to avoid saying it. The avoidance just makes it bigger than it is. Gives it weight it doesn't deserve." Neville was quiet. He had the look of someone chewing on an idea. "My parents," he started, then stopped. "I know," Harry said. He kept his voice steady and entirely free of pity, because Neville didn't need pity. He met Neville's eyes directly. "I know what happened to them." "So you know it was," Neville couldn't finish that sentence yet either. "Bellatrix Lestrange," Harry said. She's in Azkaban. She's in Azkaban, Neville agreed, with a flatness in his voice that was not peace but was the shape of someone who had learned to live alongside a fact. My gran says I should, that they'd want me to be brave. She says I'm not. He said this last part with an honesty that was more painful for being matter-of-fact. Your gran is wrong about that, Harry said. Neville looked at him. Getting in that boat tonight, Harry said, knowing Hogwarts and all that it means for your family, knowing that everyone's going to watch you and measure you against something you never asked to carry, that took courage. The Hat knew it immediately. A pause. Brave isn't the absence of fear. It's not even doing things despite fear, necessarily. It's knowing something matters more than your comfort and choosing it anyway. You do that. I watched you do it tonight. Ron was looking between them. He had the expression of someone watching something he didn't want to interrupt. Neville stood in the doorway for a long moment. You're very different from what I expected, he said finally. I keep hearing that, Harry said. He woke early. Before the others, before the castle had fully transitioned from night to morning, in the thin grey hour when the light through the dormitory windows was more suggestion than fact. He dressed quietly, took his wand, and went out. The corridors were empty and the castle was different at this hour. The portrait slept. The suits of armor stood motionless but somehow more present, as if the absence of people's attention freed them to be more fully themselves. The staircases were still, caught between configurations. Harry walked without a destination and let the castle orient him. He ended up, eventually, on the 7th floor, in a corridor he'd known from the memory fragments but hadn't fully triangulated yet. Something here, the castle's warmth under his hand on the stone wall was specific and focused, the way a door is specific when you're not sure where it is yet. He stood in front of the blank wall and thought, simply, I need a place to think. The door appeared. He looked at it for a moment, genuinely pleased, not by the discovery itself, which he'd expected, but by the speed and quality of the response. The castle knew him. The castle was working with him. He opened the door and went in. The room was circular and high-ceilinged and full of morning light from windows that, Harry was fairly sure, corresponded to no exterior face of the castle. There were bookshelves, not full, but populated by volumes he didn't immediately recognize. There was a table and a chair positioned exactly where he'd want them. There was, on the table, a cup of tea, still steaming. Harry laughed. It was surprised and entirely genuine. He sat down, picked up the tea, and looked at the ceiling, which was high and vaulted and had, near its center, a subtle spiral carved into the stone that he thought was probably as old as the building. Thanks, he said to the room generally. The room did not respond, but the tea was exactly the right temperature. He sat there for an hour with the silence and thought through what he knew and what was coming. The third-floor corridor, he needed a closer look at whatever Dumbledore had installed there, because if Voldemort was going to make a move for it, he needed to understand it before that move happened. Snape, who was watching Harry with the eyes of someone who had a complex relationship to his parents' memory and hadn't resolved it. Quirrell, who was hosting something that had no business being at a school. The Horcrux question, which was the largest and most pressing piece of his mother's research, the thread that everything else pulled on. And Sirius. Sirius Black, who had been in Azkaban for 10 years and who was his father's best friend and his godfather and who had done nothing wrong. Ragnarok's documentation was in place. Amelia Bones was apparently a person of standing. The filing was waiting for the right moment. Harry decided that the right moment needed to be created rather than found, and began working out how. He was still working when the castle came fully awake around him, when voices began in distant corridors, when the staircases shifted into their daytime configurations, when the smell of breakfast drifted from somewhere below like a polite invitation. He drank the last of the tea, stood, and went back out to meet the day. In the corridor, he nearly walked into Hermione, who was heading in the opposite direction with her notebook and the expression of someone who had also been up early and was also not surprised to encounter him here. "You found it too," she said. Harry looked at her. The room of requirement? Is that what it's called? She looked at the blank wall where the door had been. I went in and it was full of books I didn't recognize. Advanced texts. Things that aren't in the Hogwarts library. She paused. It knew what I needed. It knows what anyone needs, Harry said. That's the castle. He started walking. Come on. We need breakfast and then I need you to help me look at something. She fell into step beside him. What are we looking at? The third-floor corridor. That's forbidden, Hermione said. She said it in the tone of someone noting a fact rather than objecting to a course of action, which told Harry quite a lot. Yes, he agreed. A pause. What's in it? Something that shouldn't be here, Harry said. Something Dumbledore put here and would prefer to manage himself. I'd rather understand it before he's ready for us to understand it. Hermione was quiet for a few steps. Then, will it be dangerous? Probably, Harry said. Do you have a plan? Starting to form one, he said. That's what I need you for. The forming. He looked at her sideways. Are you in? Hermione Granger, who had been in the room of requirement before 6 in the morning on her first day at Hogwarts, reading books that weren't on any course list, gave him a look that suggested she found the question slightly unnecessary. Obviously, she said. Now tell me what you know. They walked down toward the great hall and Harry began to talk, and somewhere above them Fawkes sang one long bright note that moved through the castle's stones like warmth moves through old walls, slow and deep and entirely certain of where it was going. Chapter 4, The fire beneath the third-floor corridor smelled like dog. Not metaphorically, literally, specifically, the dense animal warmth of something large that had been enclosed in a space for several weeks. Harry stood at the locked door with his hand flat on it and catalogued the smell, a faint vibration through the stone that was rhythmic and enormous, the quality of the protective enchantments layered over the lock, which were competent but not extraordinary. Not Dumbledore's best work, he thought. Which meant Dumbledore either didn't expect serious interference, or he expected a specific kind of interference and had calibrated accordingly. Both options were interesting. Three-headed dog, Hermione said from slightly behind him. She had one hand on the wall and her eyes slightly unfocused in the way Harry had come to recognize as her processing face. The rhythmic vibration is 3 separate breathing patterns offset from each other. And the smell is consistent with Canis lupus familiaris, large breed, multiple individuals occupying the same body heat signature, which is impossible unless it's one animal with 3 heads, Harry said. A Cerberus, Hermione said. Greek mythology, guardian of the underworld, weakness is music, specifically anything with a soporific quality, though the texts aren't precise about mechanism. She refocused her eyes. Why is there a Cerberus at a school? What's under it is the better question, Harry said. He stepped back from the door. The dog is a deterrent layer. Something more important is underneath. He thought about the memory fragments, the vault break-in at Gringotts that the memories had tagged as significant, the timing, the object moved before the robbery. There's a vault at Gringotts that was emptied in July. The day before we would have visited Diagon Alley, if we'd gone on Dumbledore's schedule. You think whatever was in the vault is under that dog? I think Nicholas Flamel is a person worth looking up in the library, Harry said. And I think the connection between an old alchemist, a stone that produces immortality elixir, and a defense against the dark arts teacher who hasn't met my eyes once since we arrived will be worth understanding. Hermione already had her notebook out. Not here, Harry said. He started walking back toward the stairs. Research first, then we look again. I need to know what we're actually dealing with before we go through that door. We're going through the door? Hermione asked. Eventually, Harry said. Not yet. She wrote something down anyway. He let her. The first weeks of Hogwarts were, in terms of pure information density, the best weeks of Harry's life. Not because the coursework was difficult, it wasn't, not really, not yet, and Harry had the grace not to show this in a way that would be alienating, though sometimes the pace required visible patience. What made it extraordinary was the texture of it, the hands-on reality of magic in ways that study and quiet practice at Privet Drive hadn't replicated. The first time he said a spell in class and watched it work, Wingardium Leviosa, charms, Flitwick squeaking with delight and almost falling off his stack of books, there was something in the bodily experience of it that connected theory to practice in a way that was almost physical, a click of understanding that rippled out through everything else he knew. Transfiguration was McGonagall's domain, and McGonagall's domain was orderly and demanding and exactly what Harry wanted from a class. She had assessed him in the first lesson with the precision of a person who spent their professional life evaluating young minds, and Harry had felt her reach a conclusion that she kept carefully off her face, which he respected. He matched her precision for precision. He turned his match into a needle in 40 seconds, which was 30 seconds faster than the class average and which McGonagall acknowledged with a single raised eyebrow and a small mark in her book that felt, coming from her, like a standing ovation. Hermione turned her match into a needle in 38 seconds and McGonagall made the same mark twice. Harry caught Hermione's eye and she was struggling very hard not to look pleased with herself and failing, and Harry smiled with complete genuine warmth and she stopped struggling and just was pleased with herself, which was the better outcome. Potions was the variable. Snape arrived to the first potions lesson with the quality of a man who had spent considerable time deciding how to approach something and had reached a conclusion he was committing to. He taught with precision and acid commentary in equal measure, moving through the dungeon classroom with the efficiency of someone who had choreographed their own presence, pausing at certain students with particular intent, sometimes to criticize, sometimes to examine. He paused at Neville Longbottom with the precision of a surgeon finding a nerve, and Harry watched this and noted it. When Snape stopped at Harry's workstation, the silence that fell around them had the quality of an audience holding its breath. "Potter," Snape said. He was examining Harry's potion with narrowed eyes. It was correct. It was more than correct. The color was the precise shade of mauve that indicated properly rendered Boyle-Cure potion, the consistency exactly right, the smell inoffensive rather than acrid. Tell me the precise effect of incorrectly harvested flobberworm mucus on this preparation. It introduces excess moisture, Harry said, which breaks the oil suspension balance and produces a patchy application effect rather than a uniform one. The potion still technically works but with roughly 40% reduced efficacy. A pause. Snape's expression didn't change but something in the quality of his stillness did. And the alternative thickening agent if flobberworm mucus is unavailable? Horclump secretion at 2/3 the volume, Harry said. It's more acidic, so you compensate by reducing the fire temperature by approximately a quarter for the last 2 minutes of preparation. Snape looked at him for a long moment. Whatever he'd expected, Harry wasn't sure, but something different from this. He was recalibrating with the controlled precision of a man who did not enjoy being caught off guard but was too disciplined to show it. "Correct," he said, and moved on. He came back to Harry's station at the end of class, after the others had begun filing out. Harry was cleaning up with methodical care, Hermione doing the same beside him. "Your mother," Snape said. He said it to Harry's hands, to the motion of cleaning, not to Harry's face. "Was exceptional at potions." Harry kept his hands moving and said nothing. He understood, from tone and context, that this was not an opener for a conversation. It was something Snape needed to say and had been holding for a long time, and the saying of it had more to do with Snape than with Harry, and the correct response was to receive it without making it large. "I know," Harry said. Quietly. "No edge on it." Snape left without another word. Hermione looked at Harry when the dungeon door closed. Harry kept cleaning. "He knew her," Hermione said. "Yes," Harry said. "Well," she said, and seemed to make a decision. "The library, then." Flamel. They found Nicholas Flamel in a footnote. This was Hermione's doing. Harry had found 3 references that were too brief to be useful, and he'd been going through the index of a history volume with the systematic thoroughness of someone who had learned at 9 that the index was often more honest than the text, when Hermione made a small sharp sound across the table that he had already identified as her found-it sound. 665 years old, she said, reading from a book Harry recognized as one of his supplemental purchases, the Advanced Magical Theory volume that wasn't on the Hogwarts list. Nicholas Flamel, noted alchemist, credited with the only known successful creation of the Philosopher's Stone. The stone produces the elixir of life and enables, Harry. The stone makes people immortal. Or rather, it enables indefinite extension of life provided the elixir is continuously produced. And someone wants it, Harry said. Not to keep. To destroy the ability to produce it. Why destroy it? Because if you're trying to come back from near death, Harry said, keeping his voice low and level, and your return depends on getting your own body back, the existence of a way to extend life indefinitely for someone else is a complication. You don't want Flamel alive and functional indefinitely. You want the stone under your control or gone. Hermione set her pen down. She was looking at him with the expression that meant she was following the logic and didn't like where it was arriving. You think Voldemort is making a move for it? Quirrell, Harry said. Did you watch him in the first lesson? He was nervous, Hermione said. He was performing nervous, Harry said. There's a difference. Genuine nervousness is inconsistent, it spikes and recedes, it responds to changes in the room. What Quirrell does is consistent and calibrated. It's a character he's wearing. He picked up his quill. Also, the smell. Hermione blinked. The smell? Garlic, obviously, everyone notices that. But underneath, there's something else. Something that doesn't match the garlic or the room or anything natural in the school. He frowned at the page in front of him. I can't identify it yet. I want to get closer. You want to get closer to the defense teacher you think is possessed by Voldemort, Hermione said. Not possessed, exactly. I don't think it's that straightforward. He tapped the page. My mother's research. The residual anchor points. The fragment that survives Voldemort's near death isn't substantial enough for full possession in the classical sense. It's more like a parasitic attachment. Something that can direct but not fully inhabit. Where would it attach? Harry looked at her. Hermione looked back. The turban, she said after a moment. He's always covered. Even indoors. Yes, Harry said. She was quiet for a moment, then, we need a plan that doesn't involve us confronting this directly. We're 11. I'm aware of how old we are, Harry said, with the mild patience of someone who had given this significant thought. We don't confront it. We understand it, we document it, and we make sure that when it moves, we're positioned to respond rather than react. What's the difference? Responding is choosing your action, Harry said. Reacting is having your action chosen for you. Hermione wrote that down. Harry was fairly sure she didn't need to, she had the memory for things she found significant, but the writing was a processing mechanism, a way of cementing and ordering. He'd noticed that about her and had stopped finding it curious and started finding it reliable. The stone, Harry said. What else is protecting it beyond the dog? Multiple enchantments from multiple teachers, according to the logic of it, Hermione said. Dumbledore would want layers. Not just the dog, there'll be puzzles, protections, obstacles. Each calibrated to a particular skill set. Which means each breakable by someone with the right skill set. Or multiple people with different skills, Hermione said. Which is what we're building, Harry said. He looked at the table for a moment, then at Fawkes, who was perched on a library shelf with the resigned patience of someone waiting for the humans to finish making plans before he was consulted. The endgame is the mirror. What mirror? Dumbledore put it there himself, I think. There'll be a mirror of Erist at the end, I can feel the shape of it, the logic. The stone will be hidden in a mirror that shows you what you want most. If you wanted to use it, you see yourself using it. If you want to find it but not use it, Harry paused. You see yourself finding it. The stone appears in your pocket. Hermione stared at him. How did you? The mirror's enchantment logic follows from my mother's research on desire-based protective magic, Harry said. She had a passage about how the most secure locks are the ones that engage the intruder's own psychology. If the intruder wants the object for use, they can't get it. Only someone who wants to protect it can retrieve it. He looked at the table again. It's elegant. It's probably the best piece of protective magic in the building. He paused. It's also completely undermined if the person trying to get the stone can genuinely convince themselves, in the moment of standing before the mirror, that they don't want to use it. Can Quirrell do that? He'll try, Harry said. Whether he can depends on how much of Quirrell is still Quirrell and how much is something else. He stood, began putting books back with the absent efficiency of someone who remembered exactly which shelf everything came from. We have time. But not unlimited time. Whatever Voldemort is building toward, it's moving. I want the stone secured properly before it moves. Properly meaning where? Back to Flamel, Harry said. Where it belongs. With the man who made it and who should be the one deciding what happens to it. October settled into November with the comfortable efficiency of academic routine, and Harry moved through it at his own pace, which was faster than most things around him and more patient than it looked. He attended classes. He listened to teachers with genuine attention. He spent evenings in the room of requirement with Hermione working through his mother's research notes, which were opening up layer by layer as they built a shared language for Lily's shorthand and Hermione's ability to find connections that Harry catalogued but didn't always see from inside. He also, quietly, and without making it a dramatic thing, began doing something about Neville Longbottom. It started with potions. Snape's treatment of Neville was systematic in the way that the worst academic cruelties are, not individual cruelty, which can be challenged, but a pattern, a consistent microclimate of diminishment that produced real effects over time. Neville's hands shook in potions. They didn't shake in other classes. The shaking was learned, the somatic response of someone who had been made afraid in this specific room, and it was causing errors that Snape then used to justify the diminishment. Harry simply started sitting next to Neville in potions. He didn't explain this. He didn't make it into anything. He moved his things to the seat beside Neville without comment and began working, and when Neville's hands started their preliminary shake, Harry would ask him a question, not a remedial question, not a leading question, but a genuine technical question that required Neville to access the part of his mind that knew things and temporarily override the part that was afraid. What's the standard chopping size for flobberworm mucus? What temperature is low flame exactly? Neville knew the answers. He always knew the answers. The knowing the answers part of his brain was in excellent order. The problem was getting there without going through the fear first. By the third week, Neville's hands were steadier. By the fifth, he produced a perfectly correct swelling solution and looked at it with an expression of pure surprise, which Snape saw, acknowledged with a micro-twitch of the eyebrow that meant nothing to Neville and meant quite a lot to Harry, and did not comment on. Harry counted this as a partial victory and moved on. Ron Weasley, who had the instincts of someone who had grown up in a large family and had developed finely tuned social radar as a survival skill, observed all of this without being told anything and drew accurate conclusions. "You're doing that on purpose," he said one evening in the common room, in the tone of someone noting a chess move. "Doing what?" Harry said, not looking up from his book. "The Neville thing. The questions in potions." Harry turned a page. "Neville's excellent at potions when he isn't terrified," he said. It seemed worth addressing. Ron was quiet for a moment. He had the look of someone revising a model. "You're different," he said, finally. "So I've been told," Harry said. "No, I mean," Ron set down his own homework with the expression of someone who needed to say something accurately and was finding the language for it. "My brothers talk about Harry Potter like there's a way it was supposed to go. Fred and George have bets on it. Everyone expected something." He looked at Harry. "You're not disappointed, are you? That it's not more dramatic?" Harry set down his book and looked at Ron properly. What would be dramatic enough? I dunno, Ron said. Fighting things. Adventures. The way it is in stories. Things are being fought, Harry said. Adventures are happening. They just don't look the way stories make them look because stories edit out the part where the adventure is mostly preparation and research and patience. Ron made an expression. A bit bleak, honestly. It's effective, Harry said. Bleak is a style choice. Effective is a result. He picked up his book again. The chess team, by the way. You should join. Ron blinked. What? You think in chess patterns? I watch you play with your brothers in your memory, I've seen your family in photographs in the common room, I mean. The way you track multiple conditional scenarios at once. It's a chess mind. Harry looked at him sideways. The Hogwarts chess team is apparently not very good. You could change that. Ron looked at him with the expression of someone receiving information about themselves that they hadn't known to expect and weren't sure what to do with. Did you just analyze me? Everyone, Harry said, entirely without apology. That's a bit much. Probably, Harry agreed. Is it wrong? Ron opened his mouth. Closed it. No, he admitted. I'm quite good at chess. He picked up his homework with the dignity of someone reclaiming their narrative. The team, he said after a moment. Think about it, Harry said. The Quidditch situation arose, as most unexpected things did, through the intersection of someone else's bad decision and Harry's presence. He'd been in the courtyard after Charms, Hermione beside him reviewing her notes on the cheering Charms theoretical basis while Harry listened with the half-attention he could afford things that required his surface mind while his deeper processing worked on something else. The thing he was deep processing was the question of exactly when Quirrell would make his move for the stone, which he'd been timing based on patterns of behavior that he'd been tracking without making it obvious he was tracking them. Draco Malfoy came around the corner at speed with Crabbe and Goyle in formation, and Neville Longbottom almost walked directly into him and didn't, and the brief collision avoidance between them sent Neville's Remembrall spinning out of his hand and into Malfoy's. It was an accident. Harry watched it with the complete attention he gave all situations involving colliding social forces, which was constant. What's this? Draco held up the Remembrall. It's mine, Neville said, with the quality of someone who knew what was coming and was trying to assess which direction it came from first. I can see it's yours, Draco said. He wasn't being particularly aggressive, he was performing casual possession, which was a different register, the register of someone who had grown up using social authority as a default rather than a weapon. He turned the Remembrall in his fingers. Why is it going red? I forgot something, Neville said. You forget something every day, Longbottom. Draco looked up and his eyes hit Harry, who had stopped and was watching with the expression of patient attention, and something shifted in Draco's calibration. He looked back at Neville, made a small decision that was visible to Harry if not to anyone else, and held the Remembrall out. Here. Neville took it. He looked surprised. Draco's expression was carefully arranged to suggest this was not magnanimity but rather that the object wasn't worth his time, which both was and wasn't the whole truth, and Harry watched Draco understand that Harry had watched all of it and register that, and give Harry a look that was slightly complicated and slightly wary and finally settled into something that was just, mutual recognition. They knew each other better than a month should have allowed. This was because neither of them performed more than they had to. Malfoy, Harry said. Not as a rebuke. Just acknowledging. Potter, Draco said, in the same register. They went their separate ways, and Hermione looked at Harry with her pen still in hand. That was interesting. He was going to do something else, Harry said. He chose not to. You think watching you made the difference? I think he knew I was watching and it clarified his own preference, Harry said. Which was to give it back. He just needed a reason to choose that rather than the other thing. He started walking again. The Sorting Hat put him in Slytherin and it was right. But right doesn't mean fixed. He's still his father's son, Hermione said. For now, Harry said. People aren't finished yet at 11. That's the whole point of being 11. The flying lesson was a complication that Harry had actually planned for, which didn't make it less annoying. Madame Hooch's instruction was clear and functional, and Harry had done the theoretical work on broomcraft from the library sources and from the memory fragments of his father who had played Quidditch at the level of genuine passion. The physical experience of the broom in his hand when he set up and it snapped immediately into his palm was not surprising. He'd expected his magic to respond quickly, but the quality of the connection was more than expected, the broom warming to him the way his wand had, the way the castle did, the way living magical things consistently did. When Neville went up and couldn't control the broom's ascent and came off at 20 feet, Harry was already moving before anyone else registered what had happened. Not dramatically, no leap, no shout, he simply stepped forward and said Accio, clear and precise, which was not on the first-year curriculum and which Madame Hooch had not authorized, and the Remembrall that had rolled away from Neville's landing spot flew to his hand while Neville himself came down with a thump that was bad but not catastrophic. His wrist, Harry said to Madame Hooch. She was already there. She examined it, broken, she confirmed, taking Neville to the hospital wing with the crisp efficiency of someone who had seen this before and would see it again, instructing everyone to stay on the ground until she returned. Everyone stayed on the ground for approximately 45 seconds. Draco Malfoy had the Remembrall. Harry wasn't entirely sure how, he'd been watching Neville, had turned back to find Draco had picked it up from where Harry had set it down. Draco held it up. I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find, he said, and there was a quality of performance in it, a knowing quality, testing something. Just give it back, Harry said. He was completely relaxed. It's more fun up there, Draco said. He'd mounted his broom. Several people were looking between them with the expression of audience members who've realized something interesting is about to happen. I know, Harry said. It is more fun up there. He mounted his own broom. Throw it, then. And I'll get it before it hits the ground. Draco looked at him. The challenge had been redirected into something he hadn't set up, and Draco, who was genuinely quick, recognized this. He threw the Remembrall in a high arc, not aiming anywhere specific, just up and away. Harry went up after it. He'd been right about the broom, it responded the way his magic responded, with the quality of something that recognized him, and the acceleration was instant and complete and absolutely exhilarating in a way he'd known from the memory fragments but which was different in his own body, in his own experience, the wind and the altitude and the precise physical joy of being very fast and very in control. He tracked the Remembrall's arc with the spatial awareness he'd trained through years of being precise about things, calculated the parabola, and arrived at the right place at the right moment with his arm extended, and the Remembrall was in his hand before it dropped more than 30 feet. He descended slowly. He handed the Remembrall to Ron Weasley, who was standing at the edge of the group with an expression of enormous uncomplicated delight, and dismounted. McGonagall appeared at the courtyard entrance with the expression of someone who had seen everything from a window and had opinions about it. Potter, she said. A word. Harry followed her, and behind him he heard Ron explaining to several people that Harry had done a Wronski feint variant without knowing what a Wronski feint was, which was not quite accurate but was much better for the narrative than the truth. McGonagall took him into her office and looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone composing a response to a situation that required two contradictory things simultaneously. You used an Accio on an object while mounted, she said. Yes, Harry said. That's 5th-year level spell work, she said. I know, Harry said. It felt like the right tool for the situation. McGonagall looked at him over her spectacles in the way that she looked at things she was determining whether to allow or challenge. Then she made the small mark in her internal register that meant something had been decided. I am going to do something I have never done before, she said, with the quality of someone making a formal statement. I'm placing a first year on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Harry held up one hand. I appreciate that. And I will play Quidditch. But could we perhaps speak to Oliver Wood first about what position is actually needed, rather than assuming seeker. McGonagall blinked. You have objections to seeker. I have no objections to seeker, Harry said. I'm asking whether it's the position the team actually needs, or whether it's the position that fits the narrative of Harry Potter appearing dramatically in a game. He met her eyes with complete evenness. I'm happy to be seeker if that's what's needed. I just prefer the decision to be about the team rather than about the story. McGonagall was very still for a moment. Then she smiled. It was brief and not entirely comfortable and completely genuine. Seeker, she said. We have been in desperate need of a seeker for 2 years. Then seeker it is, Harry said. He played his first match against Slytherin in November and won it in 4 minutes and 37 seconds, which was the fastest first catch in Gryffindor House records, which Percy Weasley immediately looked up and cited while Fawkes, who had attended the match perched on the goalpost with magnificent impartiality, sang one approving note and departed. The troll appeared on Halloween. Harry smelled it before the alarm was raised. It came through the Great Hall's ceiling enchantment as a wrongness in the air, a rank physical presence that was out of place before it was visible, and he was standing up from the table before the doors burst open and Professor Quirrell ran in with his turban askew and his face performing terror so specifically calibrated that Harry looked at him and knew, not suspected, knew, that the troll was deliberate. A distraction. For the stone. Something was happening downstairs. Hermione, he said quietly, as the hall erupted and teachers began directing students to dormitories. Bathroom, she said, equally quiet. I didn't go to the feast, I went to the library instead and came back for pudding and went to the bathroom on the first floor. She was already moving. Quirrell let the troll in. Yes, Harry said. They moved through the chaos in the same direction as the teachers but faster, cutting around the flood of students going the other way. He's heading for the 3rd floor. The troll is to keep Dumbledore occupied. Can Dumbledore be occupied by a troll? No, Harry said. But it occupies the teachers, which occupies Dumbledore through proxy. He stopped at the junction. 1st floor, bathroom, Hermione's route, a large bathroom with a window that faced the east courtyard, and the east courtyard had access to the basement stairs. The troll will go where there's noise. Hermione, go straight, get to the bathroom, and then what? She said. She wasn't afraid, precisely, she had the look of someone in a situation they prepared for in theory but not in this specific arrangement, and she was doing the fast reassessment. Get out of its way, Harry said. I'll come to you. But I need 30 seconds first. He went to the 3rd floor corridor. Not to stop Quirrell, Quirrell was the symptom. He needed to see where the interference was, map what was being attempted tonight, understand how far along the plan was. He took the stairs 2 at a time with the focus of someone who had been cataloging this building for 2 months and could navigate it dark and at speed, turned the 3rd floor corridor's corner, and stopped. The door was open. Not broken open, opened with a proper alhambra, the lock released cleanly. Inside, he could hear the dog sleeping, which meant music had already been played, which meant Quirrell had moved faster than Harry had calculated, which meant, move. He went back down the stairs faster than he'd come up and found the bathroom in under 2 minutes, and found Hermione backed against the far wall with the troll between her and the door, a mountain troll, vast and stupid and swinging a club with the enthusiasm of a creature that had discovered a new game. It had not been redirected toward her specifically, it had come in through the window because there was noise, and now it was here, and Hermione had understood that running would invite the swinging and was standing very still. Harry looked at the troll. He looked at the club. He looked at the water pipes running along the ceiling. He pointed his wand at the largest pipe. Reducto, he said. Calmly, precisely, like asking a favor. The pipe exploded. Not violently, targeted enough that the spray of water went forward in a directed flood across the bathroom floor, which gave the troll something new and confusing to deal with while also reducing traction significantly. The troll swung its club at the water, which was not a productive response to water, and Harry crossed the flooded floor to Hermione, gripped her arm, and they went through the door while the troll was still working out what water was. In the corridor, are you hurt? No, Hermione said. She was shaking slightly. Not from fear, Harry assessed, from adrenaline, which was a different thing. Good. He kept moving. Quirrell got past the dog. Did he get the stone? Don't know yet. He was thinking rapidly. He'll have gone through the trapdoor. There'll be other obstacles below, I've been mapping them. He looked at her. How's your logic? Puzzles under pressure? Better than average, Hermione said, which Harry had come to recognize as her version of excellent. Then you're coming with me, he said. They found Ron in the corridor, where he'd apparently defied the dormitory order with the instinct of someone who trusted people more than procedures and had come looking. He was holding his wand with the grip of someone who decided the wand was the right response before knowing what the situation was, which Harry found both characteristic and useful. Trolls contained, Harry told him. We have a different problem. Third floor. Ron said. Yes. I'm in, Ron said, without hesitation. The trapdoor opened onto darkness and a drop that was further than the rope suggested, and the devil's snare at the bottom greeted them with the enthusiastic embrace of a plant that had found 3 warm-blooded things simultaneously. Harry relaxed into it immediately. Tension was what it fed on, and Harry's ability to be completely still under pressure meant the plant had nothing to grip, and he was through it in 4 seconds while Hermione was talking Neville through the same process in the voice of someone who needed to be calm in order to help someone else be calm, which was itself a good reason to be calm. Ron hit the flying key challenge and his Quidditch spatial sense transformed into something extraordinary. He could track the chaos of 100 fluttering keys and identify the right one by movement pattern in under a minute, a navigational instinct that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with the way his mind worked. Harry watched him do it with genuine admiration. Ron caught the key on the 3rd pass without flying broom assistance, purely by reading trajectory and putting himself in the right place, and looked at the key in his hand with the expression of someone who had just discovered a capacity they didn't know they had. The chess game was Ron's in a way that nothing else had been Ron's yet. The chessmen arranged themselves and waited, and Ron looked at them for 4 seconds, not analyzing, actually looking, taking in positions with the whole board instinct of someone for whom chess was a language and this was a text in it, and then began calling moves with a precision and speed that made Harry entirely happy to follow direction without commentary. 10 minutes. 2 queens taken, 3 pawns sacrificed, 1 bishop moved to a position that seemed eccentric until the board position 5 moves later made it inevitable. Ron put himself in checkmate's path deliberately, looking at Harry when he did it. Go, he said. I know what I'm doing. Harry looked at him. I know you do, he said. He meant it specifically. He went. Hermione came as far as the logic puzzle, a row of 7 bottles, a riddle, a fire. She read it twice, worked it out in 40 seconds, and gave Harry the right bottle with the calm certainty of someone who had just solved a problem she found relatively interesting. The smallest one. Harry said, verifying. Smallest, she confirmed. And the round bottle on the right will get me back through the fire. Go, Harry. He went through. The room beyond the fire was quiet and empty and wrong in the specific way that things are wrong when what you expected to find isn't there. The mirror of Eriste stood against the far wall, massive and ornate, its frame inscribed with the backward script that Hermione had translated for him 3 weeks ago from a library illustration, I show not your face but your heart's desire. Standing in front of it, not looking at it but at Harry, was Quirrell. He had his turban off. Harry looked at the back of Quirrell's head, at the face growing there, the flat nose and red eyes and the face that he knew from the memories the way you know the face of something that changed everything, and felt absolutely nothing that resembled fear. Something else. Something cool and clear and decided. I wondered, Voldemort said, from the back of Quirrell's head, in a voice that was the specific voice of someone trying to perform power, whether you would come. Whether they had told you enough to find your way here. Nobody told me anything, Harry said. I worked it out. Of course you did. The red eyes assessed him with the quality of a predator evaluating whether something is prey or obstacle. You are not what the old man hoped for, are you? No, Harry agreed. He was walking sideways as he talked, very slightly, in the practiced way of someone changing the geometry of a confrontation without making it obvious. He wanted someone smaller. I had other plans. The stone, Voldemort said. You will give it to me. The stone is in the mirror, Harry said. Neither of us can take it for the wrong reason. You know that, you've been standing in front of it for 10 minutes and it hasn't given you anything. You can retrieve it, Voldemort said. Your purpose, whatever the bird has put in you, whatever your mother, something in the flat voice shifted. Something that was not quite an emotion but occupied the space where an emotion might have gone if the person who'd once owned it hadn't made certain decisions. Your mother was extraordinary, Voldemort said. Yes, Harry said. She died for you. That kind of love is, a powerful magic. One I have not encountered the mechanism of before. The red eyes moved with a quality of genuine intellectual engagement that was somehow more disturbing than rage. I studied it for years in Azkaban. You were never in Azkaban, Harry said. Figuratively. No, Harry said. You've been attached to the back of a professor's skull. That's not a figure of speech for spiritual imprisonment, that's just the consequence of destroying your own body through extreme dark magic and making some very poor structural decisions. He stopped walking. He was now positioned so the mirror was to his right and Quirrell was slightly off-center. I'm not going to give you the stone. Then you will be removed, Voldemort said, and Quirrell raised his hands. What happened next was very fast and not dramatic in the way stories make it dramatic. Harry did not perform. He did not shout a spell or strike a hero's pose. He simply moved, with the efficiency of someone who had been practicing specific movements for specific purposes for 2 months, and touched Quirrell's wrist with 2 fingers, not his palm, with his attention fully on the quality of the magic in that contact. Quirrell screamed. Not from pain, or not only. From something more specific. The contact burned because Harry's mother had died protecting him and that love had written itself into his skin 8 years ago and that writing was still there, and it was antithetical to Voldemort's presence in the particular way that opposite poles are antithetical, not symbolically but structurally, at the level of the magic itself. Lily Potter's sacrificial protection didn't turn off just because her son was 11 and standing in a room with the person who had killed her. If anything, at this proximity and with this level of presence on Harry's part, not passive presence, not a child stumbling through a dark corridor, but the full engaged presence of someone who had known for 8 years and had been building toward this moment, it was more complete than it had ever been. Quirrell lurched backward. The mirror was behind him. Harry looked at it. He didn't look at his reflection, deliberately didn't, keeping his eyes on the mirror's frame, because he needed to think about what he wanted clearly before the mirror could capture and amplify it. What did he want? He ran the genuine internal check, not to use it. Not to keep it. To protect it. To return it to Flamel. He felt the wanting of that, clean and clear, and looked. In the mirror, his reflection put a hand in its pocket and removed the stone and held it up. Harry felt the stone materialize in his pocket. Voldemort's scream, no longer from Quirrell, but from the mirror room itself, from the shape of what had just happened, was brief and comprehensive and the sound of something that had calculated very carefully and discovered the calculation had an error in it. Harry put his hand over his pocket. Quirrell crumbled. Not metaphorically, the host body, deprived of its parasitic anchor's animating presence now that the anchor had been physically prevented from achieving its goal, began failing the way a fire fails when you take away what it was burning. Quirrell fell. Harry stepped away with the same clinical care he brought to all volatile situations. The smoke that left was cold and dark and moved like it had intentions, and when it passed through Harry it was the worst thing he'd felt in his life, a moment of absolute nullity, of contact with something that had unmade itself through choices made over decades, and then it was past, moving upward and through the ceiling, and the room was empty. Harry stood in the quiet. His hand was over his pocket. The stone was warm. Fawkes appeared through the fire barrier as though fire barriers were a personal inconvenience. He found mildly beneath him, landed on Harry's shoulder, and sang. It was not one note this time. It was a full song, brief but complete, and Harry closed his eyes and let it move through him, and what it found when it moved through, the cold place the passing smoke had left, it warmed. Thank you, Harry said. Fawkes pressed his beak to Harry's temple. Then he lifted off and flew in a slow circle, which Harry had learned meant we need to go now. Harry went. He woke in the hospital wing to Dumbledore sitting in the chair beside his bed. He had known this would happen. He'd prepared for it. He'd rehearsed the versions of this conversation with the same thoroughness he brought to everything, and had arrived at the conclusion that the right approach was not performance and not confrontation but something simpler and more complete, the truth, stated plainly, without anger. He looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore looked at him. The blue eyes behind the half-moon spectacles were doing several things simultaneously: relief, genuine and specific, assessment, the recalibration Harry had been watching all year, and underneath both of those, something that was complicated and not resolved and probably hadn't been resolved for a very long time. The stone, Harry said. Safe, Dumbledore said. You left it in your pocket when Minerva found you. I've already arranged its return to Nicholas. A pause. He and Perenelle have decided to destroy it. They have enough elixir for their purposes. Nicholas is 665 years old and tells me he is looking forward to the rest. Good, Harry said. He sat up. Madame Pomfrey materialized from nowhere with the expression of someone who had opinions about sitting up, caught Harry's expression, and reconsidered. You should have destroyed it before bringing it here. Dumbledore absorbed this. Perhaps, he said. Not perhaps, Harry said. Not unkindly, he kept the temperature of it level. You brought it here because you were using it as bait. You knew Voldemort would come for it. You wanted the confrontation to happen in a controlled environment. He met Dumbledore's eyes. You'd planned it out. What kind of person would come down the trapdoor, what challenges they'd face, what it would mean about them if they came through. You wanted to see who I was. The silence that followed was long. Yes, Dumbledore said. He said it without elaboration or defense, which was its own kind of answer. I know about the will, Harry said. I know about the guardianship filing. I know about the Gringotts account draws. He paused. I know about the prophecy and what you chose to do with it. Another pause. I know about Peter Pettigrew. Dumbledore was very still. He had the quality of someone listening with their whole being, which was how Harry had always imagined he would look when confronted with something he couldn't redirect through a well-chosen phrase. How long? Dumbledore said quietly. Since I was 3, Harry said. The silence after this was different from the ones before. Heavier. The kind of silence that lives under things for years and, when it finally comes out, is too large for the room. The Phoenix, Dumbledore said. Yes, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at his hands. For a moment he was simply an old man holding something very heavy, and Harry watched this without satisfaction and without guilt. He felt something more complicated, more mixed, the understanding that the person in front of him had made choices from a specific kind of love that had hardened over time into certainty, and that certainty had done real damage, and the fact that the damage came from love rather than malice did not undo the damage. I have something for you to do, Harry said. Dumbledore looked up. The expression of a man who was used to being the one with things to ask. Sirius Black, Harry said. He needs a trial. A proper one, with evidence and legal representation and a verdict that isn't presumed. He kept his eyes on Dumbledore's. Ragnarok at Gringotts has the documentation. Amelia Bones is the legal liaison. Everything is in order. I need you to support the petition. Publicly. With the weight of your name. Dumbledore was quiet. He's innocent, Harry said. You know he is. There were circumstances, he never had a trial, Harry said. That's not a circumstance. That's a failure, and you have the power to correct it, and I'm asking you to. He held Dumbledore's gaze. I'm not asking you to admit everything. I'm not demanding a reckoning today. I'm asking for one specific thing that can be done right now and that will set right something that has been wrong for 10 years. The silence was a living thing. Yes, Dumbledore said. The same word as before, different weight. The weight of something that had been held a long time finally being set down. Yes. I will support the petition. Harry nodded. He lay back against the pillow and looked at the ceiling of the hospital wing, at the ordinary white plaster of it, at the morning light coming through the windows. I'm not your enemy, Harry said. I want to be clear about that. What happened between us is a complicated thing, and we have time to work it out. But I need you to understand that I'm not who you planned for. I'm not going to be managed. He turned his head and looked at Dumbledore. And I'm not going to be willing for anything I haven't chosen myself. Dumbledore looked at him with those blue eyes that had seen more history than most people could hold, and in them, beneath the calculation, beneath the layers of ancient strategy and long game and the cold devotion to the greater good, something small and genuine shifted. No, Dumbledore said softly. I can see that. Outside, a phoenix sang. The sound came through the hospital wing windows like warmth moves through old walls, slow and deep and entirely certain, and Dumbledore, who had known that sound for 60 years, closed his eyes when he heard it. Harry let him. Chapter 5, Blood and Goblins. The summer between first and second year was the best summer of Harry's life, which was a low bar and also a genuine fact, and he was mature enough to hold both of those things simultaneously. Privet Drive received him back with its usual atmosphere of aggressive normalcy, and Harry received Privet Drive with the equanimity of someone who understood that this was temporary in a way that was no longer theoretical. He had his trunk, his books, his wand, Athena's cage, and a letter from Ragnarok that had been waiting at King's Cross via Gringotts Owl, compact, precise, and the best thing Harry had read all year. The Wisengamot petition has been filed. Dumbledore's supporting statement was received and authenticated on June 2. Amelia Bones has confirmed preliminary review will begin before end of July. The Ministry's initial response has been what we expected, resistant, then slower and more careful, which is better. One note, a Pettigrew matter has emerged independently through Ministry tracking charms. A live animagus registered to the name Peter Pettigrew was flagged crossing a Ministry surveillance boundary in Yorkshire 3 days ago. Bones is aware. So are we. This may accelerate the timeline considerably. We recommend your presence in London no later than July 15. Come alone or bring the Phoenix. Either way, come prepared. Harry read this twice in the back of the Dursleys' car while Vernon performed the particular version of ignoring Harry that involved occasional glances in the rearview mirror, and then folded it into his jacket pocket and looked out the window at the motorway and felt the specific satisfaction of things moving. He wrote back that evening, July 15. I'll be there. What do I need to bring? Ragnarok replied in 20 hours, yourself. The Phoenix is optional but traditionally impressive in formal proceedings. Bring the research notes if you've decoded more. Bones wants to meet you. She wants to meet you, Harry thought, reading that line. Amelia Bones, who is apparently excellent at her job and not interested in how things have always been done. He made a note in his head to find out more about her before the meeting, which he did over the next week via the public records room at the local library, where they had copies of old Daily Prophet issues on microfiche from 1985 onward that told him, through the texture of what was reported and what wasn't, quite a lot about who Amelia Bones was. She'd been head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement for 4 years. She'd overseen 3 high-profile trials that had all been complicated by Ministry politics and had won 2 of them cleanly and 1 of them messily but correctly. Her niece was going to be a second year at Hogwarts. She had, according to 3 separate Prophet articles that mentioned her in passing, a reputation for asking questions that were simple and devastating and not going away. Harry liked her already. In the meantime, the summer project. His mother's research notes were spread across his bedroom floor in the organizational system he'd developed with Hermione in the Room of Requirement, which was, in terms of managing complex information, one of the best things Harry had ever found. Hermione had spent the train ride home writing letters to Harry, long, thorough letters that were essentially research memos on 4 different subjects she'd identified as needing work over the summer, with reading lists and specific questions attached. Harry had written back from the platform while waiting for the Dursleys to find him, which meant his first summer letter to Hermione had been composed in 15 minutes in a busy train station and was, he felt, one of his better pieces of correspondence. She was working on the Horcrux question from the theoretical end, magical resonance theory, the mechanics of how a fragment of consciousness could maintain coherence outside a physical body, the mathematical models for what kind of magical disruption would be sufficient to unmake such a fragment permanently. Harry was working from his mother's decoded notes, which he now had approximately 70% of and which were increasingly alarming in their implications. Lily Potter had known about the Horcruxes. Not all of them, she hadn't had a number, hadn't known the specific objects. But the theory she'd developed, which she'd labeled residual anchor points, was exactly right, was in fact a more precise description of the mechanism than anything Harry had found anywhere else. She'd worked it out from first principles with the rigorous specificity of someone who didn't leave theory incomplete because she found incomplete things untrustworthy. The part that kept Harry awake at night was the marginal note he'd found on the 17th page of the 3rd notebook, written in slightly different ink, apparently added later. If the anchors are destroyed, does the self that had been sustained by them simply end? Or is there a recovery period? A window of vulnerability? Note, the scar. Harry's scar is not a normal curse mark. The residual magical signature around it is consistent with an anchor formation. This should be impossible, an infant cannot be a chosen anchor, but the magical profile is consistent. Must examine whether proximity to the killing curse at the moment of anchor attempted formation could produce a, not anchor, but fragment. An involuntary fragment that lodged in the nearest available container. Oh. Oh no. The oh no was underlined twice. Harry's mother did not underline things unless she was certain of them. Harry had read that page many times. He knew what it meant. He'd sat with what it meant for 3 weeks before Hermione's letter arrived, by coincidence or not, with a theoretical proof of exactly the same conclusion arrived at from the opposite direction. Harry, her letter said, in the middle of 4 pages about Horcrux theory, I've been working through the 7th century texts on soul mechanics and I need to ask you something directly. The scar. Have you had your scar examined by anyone who knows what they're looking for? Because the theory I'm developing has a concerning implication and I want to be wrong about it, and the way to know if I'm wrong is for you to get a proper magical examination of the scar from someone qualified. Gringotts Cursebreakers would do it. I think you should ask Ragnarok. Harry had written back, I know. I've known for a few weeks. I'm going to Gringotts on July 15th. I'll ask then. There was a 3-day silence, which for Hermione was significant. Then, are you all right? Harry had sat with that question for an afternoon before answering it, because it deserved a real answer rather than a functional one. He wrote back, yes. Here's why, knowing the problem is not the same as being the problem. And knowing the problem is the first step to solving it. I'm not going to stop having a scar between now and July 15th and worrying about it won't change its content, so I've been spending the time finishing your mother's notes on the 4th notebook and trying to decode the shorthand in section 7, which I think might be the most important section. Hermione's response arrived 6 hours later and contained 12 pages of annotations on section 7 and the note, you are the least emotionally expressive and somehow most emotionally intelligent person I have ever met. This is confusing but I appreciate it. I have decoded section 7. You need to read page 4. Page 4 of section 7, once Harry received the decoded version, described the mechanism by which an involuntary Horcrux fragment could be separated from a living host without killing the host, a theoretical process Lily had called anchor transference, which was the same process Voldemort had used to create Horcruxes deliberately, but run in reverse, using willingness rather than violence as the operative principle. The subject must be willing, his mother had written, in the last line of the page. And must understand what is being asked. Harry read that twice. Smiled slightly at the specific echo of it. Well, he thought. At least this time it's actually my choice. July 15th arrived with the kind of London weather that couldn't decide between summer and autumn and had settled for both simultaneously, warm in the sun, cool in the shade, the sky a complicated grey and white. Harry arrived at Gringotts at 9 in the morning, having taken the night bus from Privet Drive, which was his first experience of the night bus and which he found chaotic and remarkable and would not repeat if any alternative were available. Ragnarok met him at the door. This was, Harry had learned, unusual. Senior account managers did not typically meet clients at the door of Gringotts. They met them in offices, in formal settings, after appropriate procedural stages. Ragnarok meeting Harry at the entrance was a statement, made in the goblin mode of statement-making, which was through action rather than declaration. "Mr. Potter," Ragnarok said. "You look well." "I am well," Harry said. "Thank you for the letters." "The situation has moved faster than expected," Ragnarok said, falling into step beside Harry as they entered. "Pettigrew was caught 3 days ago. A Muggle CCTV camera in Yorkshire recorded what appeared to be a small rat transforming into a man in a back alley, and a sharp-eyed ministry employee who happened to be in the right department at the right time flagged it. Bones has him in custody." He paused. "He is, as you anticipated, alive and unhappy about it." "He should be," Harry said. "What's his story?" "Inconsistent," Ragnarok said. "He spent the first 48 hours insisting he was a ministry informant whose deep cover had been blown. He is currently claiming his transformation was involuntary. Bones does not appear to find either account compelling." "Good," Harry said. They went through the marble hall and into Ragnarok's office, which Harry had been in 4 times now and had acquired the quality of a place that recognized him, the way all the places that mattered did. Ragnarok's desk was ordered, his ledgers aligned, and across from his chair was a second chair that had not been there before, occupied by a witch in dark robes with iron grey hair cut short and practical, and eyes that were behind a monocle but didn't need it to be sharp. She looked at Harry the way a very good barrister looks at a key witness, with the combined intention of complete assessment and complete attention. "Amelia Bones," she said. "Head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement." She did not say it with ceremony. She said it the way people who are confident in their work name their work, as information rather than credential. "You're Harry Potter." "Yes," Harry said. He sat down. "You're 11, she said. "For another week and a bit," Harry said. "Then I'll be 12. A corner of her mouth moved. "I've been in this department for 12 years and I have never seen a Gringotts account petition trigger a process that moved this fast or produced this much material." She set a folder on the desk between them, thick, labeled, flagged in 3 places. "Ragnarok's team has documented unauthorized account draws totaling 9,000 galleons over a decade. The guardianship filing has 3 procedural irregularities. The named primary guardian was imprisoned without trial and is therefore legally as yet uncharged, which means the guardianship was filed fraudulently even if inadvertently." She looked up from the folder. "And now we have the man who should be charged for the crime Sirius Black was imprisoned for, and he's in our custody." A pause. "Whose idea was it to have Ragnarok contact me specifically?" "Ragnarok's," Harry said. "He told me he'd retained a legal liaison with expertise in wrongful imprisonment cases. I did my research on who that was after he told me. And you won Podmore versus Ministry in 1988 on a due process argument when everyone said it was unwinnable," Harry said. "You reopened the Crouch case in 1989 even when your own department told you not to. You have a particular interest in cases where the system failed and would prefer not to advertise that failure." He met her eyes. "Those were the cases I could find. I assume there are more I couldn't." Amelia Bones looked at him for a long, considered moment. "You are not what I expected," she said. "I know," Harry said. "Ragnarok told me about the Phoenix," she said, glancing at Fawkes, who was perched on the back of Harry's chair with the elaborate casual dignity of someone who had heard a great many meetings in his lifetime and found them entertaining. He told me about the inheritance test result. He did not tell me, she paused. He did not tell me that you'd been managing this since you were 3 years old. He probably considered it a privacy matter, Harry said. Were you? She said. Managing it? In the sense of preparing, yes. Actively acting, no. I couldn't act until I was here. He gestured slightly at Gringotts. I needed access to the accounts and legal capacity and a person like you. The first two I could arrange. The third I had to wait for. Bones tapped the folder. Sirius Black's hearing is scheduled for August 4th. 2 weeks and change. Pettigrew's evidence is being processed. We have a confession in progress, which Pettigrew is providing with the particular enthusiasm of someone who has been promised a significant reduction in his own charges in exchange for full disclosure. Her expression did something complicated that was probably the professional version of contempt. He is not an admirable man. No, Harry said. Black is still in Azkaban, Bones said. He has been for 10 years. The preliminary assessment from the Ministry healer is, she opened the folder to a specific page. Not good. The Dementor's effect over a decade is, not good, she said again. He's alive. He's coherent, some of the time. He knows his own name and your father's name, and apparently he's been holding himself together specifically by repeating the assertion that he is innocent. She looked at the page. The healer's note says he told her, when she asked how he'd maintain sanity, that he needed to be there when the truth came out. That someone would eventually come looking. Harry was very still. He was right, he said. Yes, Bones said. He was. She looked at Harry with the expression of someone who had seen a great many hard things in 12 years of the department and had learned to receive them without flinching but not without feeling. August 4th. I need you prepared to speak, if it comes to that. The Wisengamot will want to see the account holder in person, given that the Gringotts petition originated with you. I'll be there, Harry said. You should know, Bones said, that Dumbledore has not submitted a counterfiling. He is not obstructing. He submitted the supporting statement as he apparently agreed to do. She paused. I expected more resistance from that quarter. He keeps his word, Harry said. When he gives it directly, to someone who is looking at him. It's the things he decides without being asked that are the problem. He looked at the folder. There'll be political resistance from other quarters. People who'd rather this stayed as it was. There will be, Bones agreed. Lucius Malfoy has already been in my office twice this week. Both times with concerns about procedural precedent. She said it in the dry tone of someone who found the euphemism transparent. He seems worried that a successful wrongful imprisonment petition might establish precedent for reviewing other imprisonment decisions from that era. Harry thought about this. Is he right to worry? Enormously, Bones said, with a quality that in another person might have been glee. The Wisengamot has not reviewed wartime imprisonment files comprehensively since 1984. If this petition succeeds, there is a strong legal argument that all files from that period should be re-examined. She closed the folder. Which is one reason I am very interested in its success. Harry looked at her. What do you actually want out of this? The question was direct and she received it as direct questions should be received, which was honestly. A ministry that works properly, she said. That sounds naive and I find that I do not particularly care. A ministry that throws people in prison without trials is a ministry that cannot be trusted, and a ministry that cannot be trusted is a ministry that will fail at the moment it is most needed. Her monocle caught the light. We have evidence of that failure already. I'd like to correct it before the next failure. Harry nodded slowly. Then we want the same thing, he said. Broadly, she said. She stood, tucked the folder under her arm. I'll be in contact before August 4th, Ragnarok has a schedule of what we'll need from you. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Mr. Potter. The account's irregularity, the draws that went to the ministry account. We've identified the account holder. She said it with the particular care of someone placing something fragile on a surface. Harry waited. Cornelius Fudge, she said. Junior Undersecretary, in that period. Current Minister for Magic. The silence that followed was the kind that had weight and shape. Right, Harry said. Yes, Bones said. Exactly right. She left. Harry sat in Ragnar's office and looked at the door she'd closed behind her and felt the particular cold clarity of understanding that a problem he'd thought was larger, and that this was not a reason to stop but was a reason to be more careful, and that being more careful was something he was, as it happened, very good at. Fudge, he said to Ragnar. The draws were small enough to be overlooked individually, Ragnar said, with the clinical precision of someone who had been angry about this for a long time and had transferred the anger entirely into competence. Cumulatively, they read as a supplemental income stream. The account they went to was labeled, Ministry Operational Expense, Special Cases. Bones found it last week. Does Fudge know we found it? Not yet, Ragnar said. Bones is careful about when she shows her hand. He paused. She is very good at what she does. Yes, Harry said. I noticed. He drummed his fingers once on the desk, a thinking gesture, controlled and brief. The hearing on August 4th. If Fudge is named at the hearing, he will be present at the hearing, as minister, Ragnar said. And if the account draw is entered into evidence at the hearing, it is relevant to the question of why the guardianship was never reviewed despite our repeated flagging, Ragnar said. It suggests a financial incentive for the guardianship to remain in place. He met Harry's eyes. Which is to say, someone was being paid to not ask questions about Sirius Black. Harry thought about this for a moment. I need to see the Cursebreaker before we discuss anything else, he said. The scar issue. Hermione was specific about timing. Ragnar was quiet. I anticipated this request, he said. He pulled a second folder from his desk. I have had a specialist available since last week. Harry looked at the folder. You read the letter Hermione sent me? No, Ragnar said. I had the scar examined remotely, standard precaution during the inheritance test, which you took in a resonance chamber. The results were, he opened the folder. Concerning. Harry took the folder and read it. It was dense and technical and he understood approximately 90% of it, which was enough. His mother's theory confirmed, in the dry clinical language of Gringotts cursebreaking, a secondary magical signature embedded in the scar tissue, distinct from Harry's own magical profile, consistent with involuntary anchor formation. Prognosis, the embedded signature is not currently active. It functions as a dormant secondary consciousness fragment, maintained by proximity to the host's own magical resonance. Removal would require either the destruction of the primary matrix, i.e., the source entity's complete non-existence, or a focused anchored transference procedure of considerable complexity. The latter carries risk. The former is the simpler option if achievable. Destroy all the other Horcruxes first, Harry said. That is the Cursebreaker's recommendation, yes, Ragnar said. The fragment is dormant. It has been dormant since the night in question. The working theory is that your mother's sacrifice created a magical environment fundamentally hostile to the fragment, preventing its activation. He paused. The fragment cannot influence you. I know it can't, Harry said. I'd have noticed. He closed the folder. When the others are gone, the transfer procedure can be performed here, Ragnar said. We have conducted 8 similar procedures, though none precisely analogous. The Cursebreaker's assessment is that your magical profile, he looked at Fawkes, is unusually well suited to the procedure. The Phoenix resonance is a significant factor. Harry handed the folder back. I need a list, he said. Everything we know or can reasonably deduce about the other Horcruxes. Locations, objects, current status. Ragnarok produced a third folder. Harry looked at it. You've been very busy, he said. We have been prepared, Ragnarok said. There is a difference. Dobby arrived the following evening. Harry was sitting on his bed at Privet Drive, cross-referencing Ragnarok's Horcrux notes with the decoded sections of his mother's notebooks, when a small creature operated into the middle of his room with a crack like a gunshot, stood ringing a pillowcase that was apparently its only garment, and fixed Harry with enormous lamp-bright eyes. Harry Potter, the creature said, in a voice of enormous and trembling solemnity. Dobby has come to warn Harry Potter. Harry set down his notes. Sit down, he said. The creature, a house elf, the memories supplied, recognizing the large ears and the specific quality of magically bound service in the creature's bearing, blinked enormously. Sit, Dobby doesn't, Harry Potter says to sit. There's a chair by the desk, Harry said. If you'd rather stand, that's fine too. I just thought you might be more comfortable. He looked at the creature steadily. What's your name? Dobby, sir. Dobby the house elf. Dobby did not sit. He stood ringing the pillowcase with renewed intensity, but something in his posture had changed, less coiled, less braced, more simply present. Harry Potter must not return to Hogwarts. There is a plot. A terrible, dangerous plot, and if Harry Potter returns to Hogwarts, tell me about the plot, Harry said. Dobby blinked again. He had apparently expected more resistance to the not returning to Hogwarts part. Dobby, Harry Potter is not alarmed. I'm paying attention, Harry said. There's a difference. Alarm doesn't help me understand the plot. Tell me what you know. Dobby's enormous eyes went through several things in rapid succession: surprise, a quality of wondering recalibration, and then the look of a creature making a decision. He sat down on the chair. It swamped him. He looked small and strange, and somehow, sitting there in the chair by the desk with his pillowcase arranged around his knees, very dignified. Dobby's master, Dobby said carefully, in the specific mode of someone speaking around something. Dobby's master has a plan. There is an object. A very bad, very old object. Dobby's master has had it for many years, and this summer he is thinking of using it. At Hogwarts. The object would open something. Something that has been closed for 50 years. He swallowed. Dobby's master is Lucius Malfoy, Harry said. Dobby made a sound like a small explosion and tumbled off the chair. Harry got up and helped him back up, and Dobby allowed this with the expression of someone in complete shock. Harry Potter knows, Lucius Malfoy has a vault with objects that belong to Voldemort, Harry said. He kept them after the First War. One of them is a diary. It's not just a diary, it's a storage container for a fragment of Voldemort's consciousness from when he was 16, which makes it extremely dangerous and also not something Malfoy fully understands he has. He sat back down. He's planning to give it to a student. Or get it near students. Probably through someone's schoolbooks. Dobby was staring at him. The enormous eyes were enormous in a new way. How does Harry Potter know all of this? I did my research, Harry said. He looked at Dobby. You came here on your own, didn't you? Your master doesn't know you're here. No, Dobby whispered. If master knew, Dobby would be punished very badly. He pressed the pillowcase to his face briefly, a gesture that was both distress and suppression of it. But Dobby could not, Harry Potter must not. You're very brave, Harry said. He said it simply, because it was true. Coming here, knowing the risk. That's brave. He waited until Dobby lowered the pillowcase and looked at him. I'm going to deal with the diary. But I need to know, do you know where it is right now? In Master's study, Dobby said. In a hidden case, under the dark books. Does it look like it might leave the manor soon? Before term starts. Dobby thought. Master has been excited, he said, with the specific quality of someone describing something that frightened them. Excited the way he gets before doing something he thinks is clever. He looked at his hands. Dobby thinks soon. Then we have a window, Harry said. He was thinking. The diary was a Horcrux. His mother's notes identified it as the first one Voldemort had made, the repository of his teenage self, Tom Riddle aged 16, and it had a specific destruction mechanism because basilisk venom was one of the few substances that could destroy a Horcrux effectively enough to prevent reconstitution. Basilisk venom. Dobby, he said. The Chamber of Secrets. Is it real? Does it exist? Dobby's eyes went impossibly wider. Dobby knew Harry Potter would ask. Dobby has heard Master speak of it. It is real. It is, beneath the school. The monster inside, is a basilisk, Harry said. Yes. I know. He tapped his knee, thinking. A basilisk's venom. A 60-foot serpent living under a school. A Horcrux in Malfoy's study. He could feel the shape of how these things connected, the cause and effect of Malfoy's plan. The diary would open the chamber would be opened in a way that suggested a Muggle-born student was the culprit. The resulting climate of fear would allow Malfoy's political faction to push through what they wanted to push through. Methodical. Patient. Exactly the kind of plan that Lucius Malfoy, who was Draco's father and therefore not stupid, would construct. If the diary is destroyed before it gets to Hogwarts, Harry said, the plan fails at its foundation. Dobby was looking at him with the expression of someone watching a very specific miracle. Harry Potter would destroy it. Before it can hurt anyone, Harry said. Yes. He thought about the basilisk. A 60-foot basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets was a problem for a different reason too, not just as a weapon, but as an uncontrolled living creature beneath a school full of children. The monster needed to be dealt with independently of the diary. But the diary first. I need to get the diary before Malfoy moves it. He looked at Dobby. Can you bring it to me? Dobby went completely still. The sort of still that happens when a question confronts something that has been impossible for a long time and suddenly might not be. Dobby cannot take from Master's possessions, he said. Slowly. Carefully. Dobby is bound. If Dobby takes, what if you didn't take it? Harry said. He thought out loud, which he rarely did, but Dobby had the look of someone who would follow the reasoning if he could see it. What if the diary were to be accessed by someone with the right to access it? Malfoy's vault items were acquired through post-war provisions that had specific legal conditions. If any of those items were dark artifacts classified under the 1689 Registry of Cursed Objects, possession after that date was technically illegal. The Gringotts legal team identified several items in the Malfoy holdings that were flagged under that registry. He looked at Dobby. If Bones authorizes a lawful seizure of those items as part of the ongoing inquiry, then they would not be Masters any longer, Dobby said, slowly. Then they would be evidence, Harry said. Property of the Ministry for legal purposes. And you can't steal what isn't your master's. Dobby sat very still. Then he did something Harry hadn't expected, he started crying. Not distressed crying, the specific crying of someone for whom a door has just opened in a place they had given up checking for doors. Harry Potter, Dobby said, through it, is the most, don't, Harry said, not unkindly. Save it. We have work to do. He handed Dobby a piece of parchment and a quill from his desk. Can you write? Dobby can write, Dobby said, recovering with considerable speed. Write down everything you know about the diary's location and physical description, Harry said. I'll send it to Bones tonight. Dobby wrote. Harry watched him, watched the care with which the creature formed the letters, watched the contained precision of someone doing something they believed mattered with the fullness of their capacity, and felt the specific affection of someone recognizing that the smallest and most overlooked people were sometimes the most valuable. Dobby, Harry said, while Dobby was finishing. After this, when the diary is gone and Malfoy's plan is finished, are you going to be safe? Dobby's quill paused. Dobby will be, Master will be angry. But Dobby will not have done anything wrong, technically. He looked at the word carefully. Master will have no proof. And if he has proof? Dobby looked at his pillowcase. The gesture of someone choosing not to finish a thought they've thought before. I'll look into it, Harry said. There are laws about house elf treatment. Old ones and new ones. Bones might. Dobby is not important enough for that, Dobby said. Very quietly. You came here, Harry said, on your own, at risk to yourself, to warn me. That is not the behavior of someone who is not important. He met the enormous eyes directly. I will look into it. That's a promise. Dobby looked at Harry Potter for a long time. Then he folded the note carefully and handed it over, and stood up from the chair with the dignity of a creature who had just remembered they had some, and said, Harry Potter is very unusual. I know, Harry said. Dobby operated with a small pop, and Harry was alone in his room with the letter in one hand and the decoded notes of his dead mother in the other, and he sat for a moment just being the thing those two items made him, the son of Lily Potter and James Potter, who had known more and done more and loved more than any of the people who tried to write his story for him. He wrote the letter to Bones, sent it with Athena, and went back to his notes. The Wisingamot hearing on August 4th was in a circular stone room beneath the Ministry of Magic that smelled like old parchment and the particular damp of underground stone, and it was already full when Harry arrived with Ragnarok at his left and Amelia Bones at his right. He was 12 years, 3 weeks, and 4 days old. The Wisingamot had 52 voting members and approximately twice that in observers, advisors, journalists and curious ministry personnel who had found one reason or another to be in this room today. Harry looked at them without expression and found the ones he needed to locate, Dumbledore, in the upper left tier, wearing deep blue and watching Harry's entrance with the careful attention he'd been giving Harry since the hospital wing, Lucius Malfoy in the right tier, immaculate in grey, his expression a masterwork of controlled neutrality, and in the chair behind the minister's bench, Cornelius Fudge, who was a small round man in a bowler hat that seemed designed to reassure rather than impress, and who looked, when his eyes found Harry across the chamber, precisely like what he was, a man who had made a decision 11 years ago that he had been hoping would never find him. It had found him. Sirius Black was brought in separately, through a side door, and Harry turned to look at him before anything else happened, before the proceedings began, because this was the thing that mattered most in this room and he wanted to see it with the full attention it deserved. Sirius Black was 34 years old and looked considerably older. He was thin in the way that people are thin when thinness has been done to them rather than chosen, and his hair was long and unkempt, and his eyes, grey, startlingly light against the pallor of 10 years of too little sun, moved around the room with the alertness of someone who had kept their minds sharp through sheer refusal to let it go any other way. He was wearing ministry-issue robes that didn't fit him and he wore them with the instinctive dignity of someone for whom dignity was a decision rather than a circumstance. His eyes found Harry. Harry did not look away. He looked back, with the direct and complete attention he gave everything that mattered, which was a lot, and this was at the top of the list, and he let Sirius see that. Let him see the lack of hesitation, the lack of pity, the presence of something much simpler and more important than either. Sirius Black made a sound that was not a word. His hands, cuffed in front of him on the table, tightened briefly and then released, and something moved through his face that was too large for his expression to hold. Harry nodded once. I know. I came. We've got you. Sirius closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were clearer. The proceedings began. Bones was extraordinary. Harry had anticipated competence and received mastery. She introduced evidence in a sequence that was architecturally precise, each piece positioned so that the next piece was already implied by what had come before, building a structure that was impossible to dismantle from inside because every load-bearing element was connected to several others. Pettigrew's confession, now formally signed and witnessed. The Gringotts' account documentation. The testimony of 3 Aurors who had been present at Sirius's arrest and had always had quiet reservations about the paperwork. The Ministry Healer's assessment from Azkaban, read into the record with the clinical language that made its content somehow more devastating than dramatic language would have. Lucius Malfoy's representative, he had sent a representative rather than speaking himself, a choice Harry noted and analyzed, raised 3 procedural objections, each of which Bones dismantled in the specific way of someone who had spent the last 3 weeks anticipating every possible objection and preparing 12 responses for each. The representative stopped raising objections after the second dismantling with the expression of someone who had been sent into a fight without adequate information about the opponent. Then Harry was asked to speak. He stood. He was 12 years old in a room full of adults who governed the magical world, and he stood with the posture of someone who had always occupied whatever space he was standing in, and he spoke. He didn't perform. He didn't give a speech, he gave facts, in the order in which they had occurred, in the specific voice of someone who had known these facts for a very long time and was finally in the right room to say them. He described the memory fragments. He described the Gringotts' findings. He described Pettigrew's presence in a location that was incompatible with being dead. He described his father's letter and what it said about Sirius Black. My father, Harry said, toward the end, in a voice that was entirely even, wrote that he knew Sirius Black the way he knew his own hands. He asked me to find Sirius. He said Sirius would do anything for me. He paused. Sirius Black has spent 10 years in Azkaban for a crime he didn't commit, sustained by the belief that the truth would come out. He was right. The truth has come out. He looked at the Wizengamot, looked at each tear, each face, holding the room with the particular quality of attention that meant he was taking full measure of what was here. I'm asking for a verdict that is not just legally correct but actually right. Those should be the same thing. Today they can be. He sat down. The vote took 11 minutes. 44 in favor of full exoneration, 7 abstentions, 1 against. The one against was a very old wizard in the back row who appeared to be asleep and may have pressed the wrong button. The cuffs on Sirius Black's wrists opened. He looked at his own hands for a moment, at the fact of their freedom, at the reality of the thing he'd been in that room for, and his grey eyes were too bright and he looked at Harry, who was looking back. Harry stood up from his chair, walked across the chamber floor, and held out his hand. Sirius Black stood. He was unsteady, the 10 years in his legs, in his balance, but he stood, and he took Harry's hand, and then he did the thing that Harry had not fully planned for, which was that he gripped Harry's hand and pulled him into a hug, the fierce and comprehensive hug of a man who had been waiting for this specific moment for a decade, and Harry, who had not been hugged in a way that meant something since he was a year old and did not have strong data on what to do with this, stood very still for a moment and then, with the same completeness he brought to decisions that mattered, hugged back. Fawkes, on the chamber's top railing, sang. The sound moved through the stone room like warmth moves through cold stone, slowly, and then all at once. The diary arrived at Gringotts on August 11, via Bones's authorized seizure of Malfoy's registered dark artifact collection, which had been flagged under the 1689 registry in a filing that Ragnarok had prepared with what Harry could only describe as creative efficiency. Harry went to Gringotts to see it and stood in the secured evidence room looking at a small black diary with T.M. Riddle on the cover, and felt the Horcrux inside it the way he felt the one in his scar, a dark frequency, a wrongness that his magic instinctively recoiled from. But it was contained. Inert in its box, unable to do what it was designed to do. The cursebreaker assigned to it was a goblin named Garsek who moved through the evidence room with the specific caution of someone who respected very dangerous things and therefore survived working with them. Basilisk venom, Garsek confirmed, examining the diary through protective screens. The only effective agent. We have a preserved sample in the archive, taken from a basilisk destroyed in 1832. Enough to destroy this and several more items of this type, if they present themselves. There will be more, Harry said. Not many. But more. Garsek looked at him. How many? Working on the exact count, Harry said. The theory says between 5 and 7 total original creations. We have this one and the one in my scar. 4 or 5 more, somewhere. One of them is in Dumbledore's custody and he may not know what it is. He watched Garsek prepare the application. One may be an animal, possibly a snake. Garsek paused. Locating a Horcrux in a living being complicates destruction methodology considerably. I know, Harry said. One problem at a time. The diary was destroyed in 40 seconds. The scream it made when the venom hit it was brief and real and not human, and then the diary was inert paper and the darkness in it was simply gone, and Harry looked at the charred remains and felt the Horcrux count drop by 1 in some deep internal register he hadn't known he kept. 2 gone counting the scar, and the scar was dormant and waiting, not destroyed yet. But the active threat was reduced. The chamber wouldn't open now. The plan Malfoy had been building for years had its foundation pulled from underneath it, silently, with nobody in the papers and nobody making speeches, because Harry had long since decided that the most effective solutions were usually the ones that happened before the crisis rather than during it. He thought about Draco Malfoy at Hogwarts, who was starting second year in 3 weeks, who didn't know that his father's plan had been dismantled, who was going to have a very different year than the one his father had arranged. Harry thought about what that might mean for Draco specifically, and decided it was worth paying attention to. Sirius was recovering at a Muggle hospital in Edinburgh, at Bones's insistence, where the healers were functional rather than politically complicated. Harry visited on August 15, taking the night bus to Edinburgh with the resigned competence of someone who had decided the night bus was the price of urgency. The hospital room was ordinary and small and full of afternoon light, and Sirius was sitting up in bed with color beginning to return to his face and a quality of animation that had been absent in the Wisengamot chamber, as if exoneration had given his body permission to start coming back. He was reading a Muggle newspaper with the focused attention of someone catching up on a decade of missed events, and he looked up when Harry came in and folded the paper with a kind of deliberate calm that Harry recognized as the management of something larger than calm. "I ordered biscuits," Sirius said. "The Muggle kind, with the chocolate. Didn't have those in, for a while." He gestured at a plate on the bedside table. Harry took a biscuit and sat in the chair. "How are you actually feeling?" "Fragile," Sirius said. He said it without hedging, which Harry appreciated. "Strange. Like I got out of something that should have been permanent and my body isn't sure if it's supposed to trust that yet." He looked at Harry. "You look like James," he said. "Everyone says that. But you look at people the way Lily looked at them. Like you're solving something." "I usually am," Harry said. "She always was too." Something moved across Sirius's face, the familiar complicated thing that grief does when it surfaces through years of suppression into fresh air. Did you have anyone? Growing up. It was the Dursleys, James and I always said if anything happened, the Dursleys would be the last. I had enough, Harry said. He said it carefully and specifically. Not warmth. But enough space to think and enough access to information to prepare. He looked at Sirius. I wasn't happy. But I was okay. Sirius absorbed this with the look of a man receiving something he'd been dreading and finding it survivable. I wanted to find you, he said. From the beginning, the first year I still thought someone would figure it out, that they'd realize, that there'd be a hearing. He stopped. Then the Dementors make you think the worst things. They take the good memories and leave everything else. He looked at his hands. The thing I held on to was, I knew Prongs. I knew him better than I knew myself in some ways and he trusted me, and the idea that I could, he stopped again. I'm not going to perform how bad it was. It was very bad. I'm here now. You're here now, Harry agreed. Your letter, Sirius said. He had the quality of someone changing direction deliberately, returning to the present because the present was better. The one you sent through Gringotts, in March. The one that said you knew and you were coming. I read it every day. He looked at Harry. You were 11 when you wrote it. I was prepared when I wrote it, Harry said. I'd been prepared for a while. The Phoenix, Sirius said. He looked at Fawkes, who had settled on the windowsill and was watching the Edinburgh street outside with the patient interest of someone for whom all cities were variations on the same theme. You said in the letter he came to you when you were 3. He broke something open, Harry said. Memory blocks. Things that were supposed to keep me from knowing who I was and what had happened. He paused. Dumbledore put them there. Sirius went very still. Then, slowly, did he? Yes, Harry said. Not cruelly. But yes. The stillness lasted a long time. And Dumbledore, Sirius said. The hearing. He supported it. He did what I asked him to do, Harry said. We're working through things. It's complicated. He cared about my parents genuinely, I believe that. He made choices using that care as justification that he shouldn't have made. He's starting to understand that I know the difference. He looked at Sirius. I don't think he's done making those kinds of choices entirely. But he's more careful now. More careful because of you, Sirius said. Partially, Harry said. Sirius looked at him for a long moment, the full, considering look of someone assessing something they have context for but need to see clearly. Your father would have been, he started. He would have been so, he stopped. I can't finish that sentence without becoming, he picked up his biscuit and looked at it. He would have been absolutely insufferably proud. Harry felt something happen in his chest that was warm and complicated and entirely real. I know, he said. They sat in the Edinburgh afternoon light with the biscuits between them, and Fawkes sang one quiet note from the windowsill, and outside a city went about its business entirely unaware that in a small hospital room, 2 people who had been separated by 10 years and a crime and a series of choices made by other people were, with the comfortable ease of something that had always been true, simply becoming what they were supposed to be. Family.